Hey guys, today we are going to embark on a journey, not through time in a shiny, polished machine, but through the very fabric of ancient nights. Imagine, if you will, that you are lying on sun-baked earth, the air still thick with the day's lingering warmth. But as the sun dips below the horizon, a different chill, a celestial one, begins to settle. Above you, the sky unfolds like a dark velvet curtain, punctured by a million tiny, shimmering diamonds. No city lights here, no neon glow, just the raw, undiluted majesty of the cosmos. You stretch, a little yawn escapes, and you gaze up, utterly lost in that profound, silent expanse. This isn't just a pretty picture. This is your reality hundreds, thousands of years ago. You're cold, you're probably a bit hungry. And honestly, if a saber-toothed cat decided you looked like a tasty midnight snack, you probably wouldn't survive this. But tonight, your gaze is drawn upward, not by fear, but by an insatiable curiosity, a primal urge to understand the silent dance of those distant, flickering lights. And it's this primal urge that leads us to a truly astounding mystery. How did ancient minds, without the aid of sophisticated telescopes or even basic magnifying lenses, manage to map the stars with such breathtaking precision? You pull your rough wool cloak tighter, the dry grass tickling your ear as you shift, trying to find a comfortable hollow in the ground. The air smells of dust and distant wood smoke, a faint, earthy aroma that's both comforting and a little wild. Above, the Milky Way sprawls across the zenith, a cloudy river of light that seems almost within reach. You trace imaginary lines between the brightest points, instinctively seeking patterns, stories, a sense of order in the grand celestial chaos. This wasn't just idle stargazing for our ancestors. It was survival. It was how you knew when to plant your crops, when the rivers would flood, when the hunting season would begin or end. It was the ultimate clock, calendar, and compass, all rolled into one impossibly vast, twinkling package. Think about it for a moment. No laser pointers, no GPS, not even a simple pair of binoculars. Just the naked eye, a keen intellect, and an almost superhuman patience. How do you even begin to chart something so immense, so seemingly boundless? You might pick out a particularly bright star, maybe that fiery red one winking low on the horizon, and you'd watch it night after night, noting its subtle shifts. Then you'd find another, and another, slowly building a mental, then perhaps a physical map of the heavens. It's a bit like trying to draw a map of your entire country just by walking every single road and path, except the roads are invisible, constantly moving, and occasionally obscured by pesky clouds. Fun, right? Historically, one of the earliest and most remarkable attempts at systematic stellar observation came from ancient Babylon. These Mesopotamian astronomers, huddled on ziggurat rooftops under those same star-drenched skies, developed incredibly sophisticated methods for tracking celestial bodies. They weren't just looking at pretty lights. They were meticulously recording their positions, predicting eclipses, and even developing complex mathematical models that, frankly, would make most of us reach for a strong cup of coffee and a geometry textbook. This wasn't just a hobby. It was serious science, driven by religious beliefs, agricultural needs, and a pure, unadulterated thirst for knowledge. Now, for a truly quirky tidbit, imagine trying to mark the position of a star on the ground. Some ancient cultures, notably in Peru, created enormous geoglyphs. Think Nazca lines, but specifically for astronomy. You'd essentially draw giant cosmic calendars or observatories directly onto the Earth, aligning lines and figures with significant celestial events. So, while you might be thinking of a parchment map, they were using entire landscapes as their cosmic canvases. It's like having a giant etch-a-sketch, but instead of making bad drawings of houses, you're mapping the cosmos. And if you messed up, well, that's a lot of redrawing on a grand scale. Probably why they got it right the first time. One of the fascinating aspects that historians still argue whether these early star maps were primarily for practical purposes, like navigation or agriculture, or if they served a deeper, more spiritual or mythological function. Were they charting the gods, or simply charting the best route to the next watering hole? Or, more likely, was it an inseparable blend of both? You can almost hear the hushed debates echoing through time, ancient scholars arguing vehemently over the true purpose of a particularly obscure star alignment. It's easy to project our modern, scientific views back onto them. But their world was deeply interwoven with the celestial sphere in ways we can barely comprehend from our light-polluted concrete jungles. You feel a shiver, not from the cold, but from the immense weight of human history pressing down on you. It's a reminder that before apps, before GPS, before even paper, there were just human eyes fixed on the eternal mystery above. Imagine you're deep in the pre-dawn chill, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones even through layers of rough hides. Your breath plumes in the faint light, and the silence is so profound, you can almost hear the slow turn of the earth itself. Above you, a tapestry of stars unfolds, so vivid, so utterly overwhelming without the light pollution of our modern world, that it feels as if you could reach out and pluck them from the inky blackness. You're not just looking at them. You're feeling them, a primal connection to a cosmos that dictates your every waking and sleeping moment. This is the life of your ancient ancestor, huddled by a dying fire, eyes fixed on the celestial dance. You see the faint shimmer of the Milky Way, a river of light flowing across the heavens, and you instinctively know it means more than just pretty sparkles. Because out here, in a world where the nearest supermarket is, well, non-existent, your very existence hinges on understanding these cosmic clues. You probably won't survive this if you don't figure out which star means winter is coming, or when the migrating herds will pass through. No app for that, buddy. Just raw, terrifying reality. This is where humanity's first true scientists emerged, not in labs with beakers and Bunsen burners, but under the vast, unblinking eye of the night sky. Their lab equipment, their own keen eyes, an astonishing memory, and the collective wisdom passed down through generations around flickering fires. You see, for these early humans, the night sky wasn't just a pretty backdrop for bonfires and philosophical musings, though I bet they had those too, once dinner was secured. It was a giant cosmic instruction manual. The sun told them day and night, which is useful, sure, but the stars. They whispered about spring and harvest, migration and drought. Without a smartphone telling you the weather for next Tuesday, your survival depended on spotting which familiar star group had just poked its head over the horizon at sunset. Was that Orion, heralding the lean, cold months? Or perhaps Scorpius, signaling the time to gather certain berries before they spoiled? Getting it wrong wasn't just inconvenient. It was, quite literally, a recipe for starvation. Imagine trying to explain seasonal affective disorder to someone whose winter blues meant actual, bone-chilling famine, because they misread the celestial memo. This systematic observation of the heavens wasn't some intellectual pursuit for bored cave dwellers with too much time on their hands. It was the birth of predictive analytics, the original big data project, if you will. The rising and setting of certain stars, what we now call heliacal risings. When a star first becomes visible in the east just before sunrise, became the world's first reliable calendars. And this, my friend, is your mainstream historical fact for the night. The ability to predict the turn of seasons, heralded by these precise stellar movements, was absolutely fundamental to the agricultural revolution. Suddenly you weren't just chasing food, you were growing it. You could plant grains with confidence, knowing the floods would come or the dry season would pass precisely when the stars told you they would. This wasn't just a good idea. It was the difference between a thriving village and an empty, frozen cave. It was the ultimate know thy enemy strategy, except the enemy was famine, and your battle plan was written in starlight. And it wasn't just about farming. Imagine you're on a long trek across uncharted territory, perhaps following game, perhaps seeking new foraging grounds for your clan. No GPS, no map app telling you turn left in 500 feet. No street signs, no friendly gas stations for directions. But overhead, the stars rotate in predictable patterns, circling a steady, seemingly unmoving point. That steady point in the northern sky, the pole star, or its ancient equivalent, becomes your unwavering beacon. You learn to read the cosmic compass, ensuring you don't wander in circles and end up, well, let's just say, becoming part of the local food chain yourself. These star maps, etched not on parchment but in the vastness of the night, were humanity's first navigational charts, guiding journeys across continents and eventually across oceans. Think of the brave souls who ventured out onto the open sea, relying solely on the consistent patterns of the constellations above them to find their way home, or to entirely new lands. They didn't have radar, just raw courage and an intimate knowledge of the cosmos. Now for a quirky tidbit. Did you know that some indigenous cultures, particularly those in Australia, didn't just see bright stars as constellations? They also saw constellations in the dark spaces between the stars, forming figures like the celestial emu. This dark emu, its head defined by the dark Coalsack Nebula, would appear in different positions throughout the year, signaling prime hunting or foraging times based on the emu's perceived breeding or egg-laying cycles. It's a beautiful, sophisticated example of how their practical knowledge of the land was inextricably linked to their profound understanding of the sky. A sky that was a living, breathing calendar and larder. It shows an inversion of how we typically think of constellations, revealing a truly unique way of mapping the heavens for survival. Of course, not everything was purely utilitarian. Historians still argue whether monumental structures like Stonehenge in England or the even older Nabta Playa in Egypt were primarily astronomical observatories, elaborate ceremonial sites, or perhaps a clever combination of both. Were they built to precisely track solstices and equinoxes for agricultural timing, perhaps even to predict eclipses, or to align with celestial events for profound spiritual rituals and power displays? Or were they simply the ancient equivalent of a really, really fancy calendar app that also served as a temple, a kind of prehistoric spiritual GPS? It's a debate that highlights the blurred lines between science, religion, and survival in the ancient world. You probably didn't need a PhD in archaeoastronomy to figure out when to plant your turnips. But having a grand stone circle probably helped convince everyone else you knew what you were talking about when you announced the perfect planting day. It certainly added a certain gravitas to your meteorological pronouncements. The challenge, of course, was consistency and transmission. No written records, no detailed textbooks, no university lecture halls, just the relentless repetition of observations, passed down orally from elder to apprentice, from parent to child. Imagine memorizing the precise rising and setting points of dozens of stars over an entire year. noting their subtle shifts against the horizon, and meticulously correlating them with the blooming of specific plants, the ripening of certain fruits, or the movement of game herds. It required an observational rigor and an attention to detail that would put most modern attention spans to shame. We complain if our Wi-Fi is slow or if our delivery food is 5 minutes late. They relied on remembering whether a particular star appeared just above that jagged peak when the salmon were running, or if a certain cluster meant the harsh winds would soon arrive. And they did it for thousands of years, across countless generations, a testament to humanity's incredible capacity for observation, deduction, and frankly, sheer stubbornness when faced with not dying. This deep, intimate relationship with the cosmos wasn't just about survival. It shaped their entire worldview, their myths, their social structures. The stars weren't distant, abstract points of light. They were living entities, divine beings, or the spirits of ancestors, intimately connected to the cycles of life and death on Earth. Every flicker, every slow march across the night sky held profound meaning. It was the original weather forecast, GPS, farming almanac, and sacred text, all rolled into one breathtaking celestial show. And they watched every night for millennia, learning the silent language of the heavens, a language that spoke of time, direction, and destiny. A language that, if you failed to understand it, meant you probably wouldn't survive this. Their very existence was a whispered conversation with the stars, a conversation that echoed through the deep past, long before anyone dreamed of lenses and mirrors to bring the heavens closer. You stir from the primal stirrings of the human spirit, the faint echoes of survival fading as your gaze lifts once more to the inky canvas above. Now, however, the air around you isn't just cool and fresh. It carries the scent of baked mud and incense, a murmur of distant voices from a city stirring restlessly in the heart of a great plain. You are no longer just an observer, but a participant, albeit one who's just walked into a millennia-old scene, where the stakes are, well, frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a single season here without a team of ancient Babylonian priests on your side. No GPS, no weather app, no antibiotics for that suspicious rash. Just you, the stars, and a very strong chance of dysentery. Pleasant dreams. You stand now on the dusty plains of Mesopotamia, perhaps near the towering, terraced silhouette of a ziggurat, its massive brick structure reaching like a stairway to the heavens. Here, under the vast, unpolluted sweep of the night sky, a different kind of ancient mind is at work, one that sees not just light, but an intricate, divine language. You watch as a robed figure, a priest astronomer from a lineage stretching back centuries, kneels on a woven mat, his eyes fixed on the slow, deliberate dance of Jupiter across the constellations. He's not just admiring the view, oh no, he's reading. Every flicker, every shift, every planetary conjunction is a word, a sentence, a divine decree from the gods themselves. These aren't casual stargazers. These are the meticulous record keepers, the diviners of destiny, the cosmic accountants of ancient Babylonia. For them, the sky is not just a pretty backdrop. It's the daily newspaper, the farming almanac, and the royal decree rolled into one massive, celestial scroll. You see the faint glow of oil lamps from within the temple complex, illuminating clay tablets stacked high, each one inscribed with cuneiform script. This is where the magic, or rather, the incredibly tedious, back-breaking work of observation happens. Day after day, night after night, these individuals, often belonging to specialized priestly families, would meticulously track the movements of the sun, moon, and visible planets. They were obsessed with precision, Not for science as we understand it, but for prophecy. Think about it. No telescopes, no computers, no fancy chronometers. Just their remarkably keen eyesight, sundials, water clocks, and an unwavering dedication that would make your modern-day smartphone addiction look like a fleeting hobby. They're not just noting, Mars is over there tonight. They're recording its exact position relative to a catalog of fixed stars, its brightness, its retrograde motion, its precise moments of rising and setting. The sheer volume of data they collected, etched onto clay tablets and stored in temple libraries, is mind-boggling. It's a testament to human persistence, even if the primary motivation was to figure out if the next harvest would fail, or if the king was about to get sacked by a neighboring warlord. Their world was utterly dependent on these celestial messages. A lunar eclipse wasn't just a pretty show. It was an ominous warning, perhaps even a prediction of the king's death. The appearance of a comet, panic stations. The careful charting of these events allowed them to develop intricate omen texts, vast compendiums of if X happens in the sky, then Y will happen on Earth. It was an early form of predictive analytics, just with a much higher incidence of sacrificing unfortunate animals. One mainstream historical fact you can't escape here is that the Babylonians developed one of the most sophisticated systems of observational astronomy in the ancient world. Their star catalogs, particularly texts like the MULAPIN, precisely listed constellations and individual stars, alongside their heliacal rising and setting dates. The moments they first become visible or disappear at dawn or dusk. These were the fundamental building blocks of their celestial navigation and omen interpretation. But it wasn't just about foretelling doom. A crucial, practical application of their tireless sky-watching was the creation of incredibly accurate calendars. You see, the lifeblood of Mesopotamia, the very thing that made civilization bloom in this fertile crescent, was agriculture, which in turn relied entirely on the unpredictable floods of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Knowing when to plant and when to harvest was a matter of survival. The cycle of the moon, the sun's position at solstices and equinoxes, the reappearance of certain stars, these were the clock and calendar by which their entire society functioned. Without the priests' astronomical observations, agricultural planning would have been chaos, and you probably wouldn't have had those neat Sumerian city-states you learned about in history class. They tracked the moon for their lunar calendar, and then periodically added an extra month to keep it in sync with the solar year. A bit like adding an extra day to February, but way more complicated and with far more dire consequences if you got it wrong. Now for a quirky tidbit. Did you know that the Babylonian observation of Venus, the dazzling morning and evening star, was so precise that their records, preserved in the so-called Venus tablet of Amisajuka, allowed later scholars to reconstruct parts of their calendar system and even correlate it with modern dating. It's astonishing to think that a tablet from 1600 BCE still holds such specific astronomical data. It really makes you wonder how they managed such accuracy without any optical aid. Historians still argue whether the Babylonian focus on omens truly hindered or, paradoxically, advanced their pure scientific observation. Were they proto-scientists driven by genuine curiosity, or were they simply pragmatic priests creating an elaborate system to maintain social order and predict the king's indigestion? It's a fascinating chicken-and-egg situation. While their primary goal was divination, the sheer rigor of their data collection inadvertently laid foundational principles for later mathematical astronomy. They developed sophisticated arithmetical methods to predict planetary positions, eclipses, and lunar phases. Imagine trying to calculate the precise moment of the next solar eclipse using only arithmetic and clay tablets. Sounds like a fun Saturday night, right? Probably not. But for these dedicated priests, it was their life's work, a meticulous and constant dialogue with the divine above. You can almost feel the weight of their responsibility. The silent prayers for clarity as they etched another observation into the damp clay, hoping to decipher the cosmic whispers. You're standing on the banks of the Nile, the air thick with the scent of lotus and damp earth after the long, dry season. Above, the inky canvas of night stretches, spangled with 1,000,000 diamonds, each one a tiny pinprick of ancient light reaching across the void to caress your face. The river whispers secrets of the ages, a rhythm as old as time itself. You feel the current tugging at your feet, a gentle, insistent pull that has governed life here for millennia. This isn't just water. It's the very heartbeat of a civilization, and its pulse is inextricably linked to the distant, glittering pinpricks above. Without understanding that pulse, without those ancient Egyptians meticulously charting the sky, you probably wouldn't survive here for long. No flood prediction, good luck with your crops, no sense of time. Enjoy the chaos of not knowing when to plant or harvest, when to move your livestock to higher ground. Life was, shall we say, a bit more urgent back then, far removed from your climate-controlled, calendar-app-wielding existence. For the Egyptians, the heavens weren't some abstract concept to gaze at during a quiet evening with a cup of chamomile tea and a good book on existential dread. Oh no, the sky was their clock, their calendar, and their very survival guide. A celestial tapestry woven with the threads of life and death. You watch with them, perhaps a little nervously, for one star in particular. Sopdet, the brightest jewel in the night, what we now call Sirius. Its heliacal rising, that precise moment when it first peaks above the eastern horizon just before the sun, after months of being invisible, was the ultimate alarm clock. It wasn't just a pretty sight. It signaled the imminent annual flooding of the Nile, the vital inundation that brought fertile, nutrient-rich silt to the parched land, guaranteeing another harvest, another year of sustenance. Imagine the collective sigh of relief, the desperate anticipation, the joyous shouts that must have echoed across the land when that tiny speck of light finally reappeared after its long absence. It wasn't just a star. It was a promise, a divine assurance from the cosmos that life would continue. This precise astronomical observation, the heliacal rising of Sirius, was the cornerstone of the Egyptian agricultural calendar, a mainstream historical fact that underscores the practical genius of these early stargazers. They understood the cosmic ballet with a depth that puts modern binge-watching to shame. And speaking of promises, look around. The colossal pyramids aren't just architectural marvels designed to impress your neighbors, like a really over-the-top garden gnome. They're giant stone compasses pointing directly to the sky. You notice how the Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is uncannily aligned with true north. How did they achieve such astonishing precision without fancy GPS or even a decent telescope? They watched the circumpolar stars, those steady celestial anchors that never set, revolving tirelessly around a fixed point in the northern sky. By observing the movements of stars like what we now know as Thuban in the constellation Draco, they could pinpoint true north with an accuracy that still baffles modern engineers. It's like they had a cosmic laser pointer, but, much slower, infinitely more patient, and involving a lot more sand. Now, lean in closer. because this next part gets a little quirky and, frankly, a bit magical. To really manage their time, beyond the grand annual flood, the Egyptians invented a celestial calendar based on what they called decans. Picture the ecliptic, the apparent path the sun seems to follow across the sky, divided meticulously into 36 segments. Each segment was marked by a specific group of stars, a decan. As the Earth turned on its axis, a new decan would rise above the eastern horizon every 10 days, just before the sun, marking the passage of time. This gave them 36 decans, totaling 360 days, with an extra 5 epigonal days tacked on at the end of the year, sort of like cosmic bonus days for good behavior. Imagine trying to plan your vacation around a 360-day calendar, then suddenly remembering you have 5 extra days. Surprise! More Sphinx selfies and camel rides on the house. These decans weren't just for telling time. They were steeped in magic and mysticism. Each decan was associated with specific deities, certain illnesses, and even parts of the human body. If you were born under a particular decan, your destiny, health, and even your personality were thought to be influenced by it. It was like a very ancient, very complicated astrological chart, but instead of what's your sign. It was which constellation just rose with the sun on your birthday, and what does that mean for your spleen? Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest that the decans were not just for timekeeping, but also functioned as a kind of ancient medical diagnostic tool. If you had an ailment, say, a nagging headache, an Egyptian priest astronomer might consult the decan currently rising to determine its celestial influence and prescribe remedies accordingly. Forget your modern MRI. They had star charts for your sinuses and probably a charming incantation to go with it. Historians still argue whether the decan system developed primarily for calendrical purposes, purely practical timekeeping, or for religious ritual, or as an early, esoteric form of astral medicine. Was it a pragmatic necessity driving the observations, or a deep spiritual connection to the cosmos, a desire to understand the divine will inscribed in the stars? Perhaps it was all three, interwoven like the finely braided hair of a pharaoh, each strand supporting the others. You can almost hear the soft, rhythmic chants of priests in temple observatories, meticulously recording the decans' risings night after night, generation after generation. They used these decans to mark the hours of the night, creating elaborate star clocks or decanic clocks. Imagine a priest sitting in a dark temple, peering through a small slit in the roof, patiently waiting for a specific decan to cross the meridian, a celestial stopwatch indicating the passing of another hour. It wasn't exactly a smartwatch buzzing on your wrist, more like a very slow, very patient sundial for the night sky, requiring immense focus and perfectly clear skies. Light joke. Excuse me, do you have the time? Let me just wait for that specific cluster of dim stars to align with the sacred peephole, and for the moon to stop photobombing. Ah, yes, it's precisely when the Nile starts to feel vaguely itchy, which means it's almost time for the ceremonial crocodile feeding. This method of nocturnal timekeeping was vital for scheduling temple rituals, ensuring that offerings were made at the auspicious hour, and of course, ensuring that the pharaoh woke up precisely on time for his daily divine duties, which, let's face it, is a pretty important job. The sheer dedication, the painstaking observations spanning centuries, is mind-boggling. They weren't just looking at pretty lights. They were building the foundations of their entire civilization on these observations. The rhythm of the Nile, the construction of their monumental tombs, their understanding of health and fate, Their very sense of order in the universe all hinged on deciphering the cosmic clock above them. You realize how deeply integrated the sky was into their daily existence, not just as a source of poetic wonder, but as an active, predictive, and even controlling force. It makes your daily weather app seem a bit quaint, doesn't it? Because for them, the weather forecast was literally written in the stars, and the stakes were considerably higher than whether you needed an umbrella. And think again about those pyramids. Beyond the cardinal alignment, some theories propose that specific shafts within the pyramids were designed to point to certain stars, like Orion, associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife, or Thuban, perhaps to guide the pharaoh's soul on its eternal journey through the cosmos. It's a grand vision, isn't it? To not only live by the stars, but to plan your eternal journey through them, aligning your very tomb to the celestial highways of the gods. Another light joke. Just make sure your pyramid's Wi-Fi is good enough for your soul to stream directly to the constellation of your choice. Otherwise, you might end up in the wrong afterlife. That would be awkward. The interplay between earthly architecture and celestial bodies was not just symbolic. It was profoundly functional, a tangible, physical link between the human realm and the divine, a testament to an unsung genius who mapped the stars long before telescopes. You find yourself now, not staring up at the chaotic glitter of an uncatalogued Mesopotamian night, nor pondering the steady, predictable march of Egyptian decans across their cosmic clock, but rather, you're enveloped in the cool, intellectual air of a Greek academy. Imagine the scent of olive oil lamps mingling with the faint aroma of parchment, the distant murmur of philosophers debating, their voices soft and resonant as the hum of a lyre. You're not just observing the stars anymore. You're thinking about them, trying to deduce their very essence. The practicalities of predicting floods or appeasing fickle gods have receded, replaced by a profound yearning for understanding, for the pure, unblemished truth of the heavens. You recline, perhaps, on a stone bench, gazing at a carefully crafted armillary sphere, a skeletal model of the cosmos, all rings and pivots, far more conceptual than observational. Here, the celestial sphere isn't just a convenient mapping tool. It's a fundamental truth, a perfect, unchanging realm. And honestly, if you were around back then, attempting to navigate without these established cosmic principles, well, you probably wouldn't survive your first philosophical debate, let alone a stormy sea voyage. Knowing where things ought to be, even if you couldn't perfectly see them, was life or death, or at least reputation or ruin. The Greeks, you see, inherited a vast tapestry of astronomical observations from those who came before. But they did something different. They took those observations, those raw data points, and filtered them through a lens of pure reason, of geometric elegance. Plato, for instance, wasn't so much interested in where the planets were, as why they moved the way they did. He famously challenged his students to save the phenomena, to devise a mathematical model that could account for the seemingly erratic motions of the planets while adhering to the most divine and perfect form, the circle. For Plato, the heavens were a realm of ideal, unchanging forms, where everything moved in perfect, uniform circles. No messy ellipses, no wobbly paths, just celestial ballet performed by divine dancers. It was a beautiful thought, wasn't it? A cosmos where imperfection simply didn't exist above the clouds. This philosophical insistence on circular motion became a cornerstone of Western astronomy for nearly 2 millennia. It's a mainstream historical fact that this pursuit of perfect circles, largely driven by Platonic ideals, constrained astronomical models significantly, often leading to incredibly complex systems to explain simple retrogrades. Now drift with me just a little further to a figure who built upon Plato's foundations, yet grounded them with a touch more empirical observation. Aristotle. His cosmos was a grand, majestic onion layer upon layer of transparent, crystalline spheres, nested one within another. Imagine them, each one perfectly smooth, rotating with serene majesty, carrying the celestial bodies along their appointed paths. There was a sphere for the moon, one for Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and finally, the outermost sphere, the prime mover, carrying all the fixed stars. This model solidified the geocentric view, the Earth unmoving at the very center of it all. This was not just a model, it was a complete worldview, integrating physics, metaphysics, and theology. The sublunar realm, where you and I exist, was imperfect, subject to change and decay. But beyond the moon, in the superlunar realm, was pure, unblemished perfection, governed by eternal, uniform circular motion. It's almost cozy, isn't it? Knowing exactly where your place is in the grand scheme, nestled securely at the very heart of the universe. And here's a quirky little tidbit that often gets overlooked. While the main thrust was about geometry and perfect motion, there was a fringe idea floating around, championed by the Pythagorean school, that the planets, as they moved through these perfect spheres, actually created a celestial harmony, the music of the spheres. It was a cosmic symphony, inaudible to human ears because we've been accustomed to it since birth, like the constant hum of a refrigerator you only notice when it stops. Imagine the planets, each sphere resonating with a particular note, contributing to a grand, unheard melody. It's a beautifully poetic notion, isn't it? Almost as if the universe itself was whispering a lullaby. Yet, even with these elegant, philosophical constructs, the real world of observation kept throwing curveballs. Those pesky planets, occasionally seeming to move backward retrograde motion before resuming their forward march, were a constant headache. Explaining this within a system of perfect concentric spheres became a monumental task, requiring ever more intricate additions of epicycles and deference, smaller circles upon larger circles, like a Rube Goldberg machine designed to explain a simple jig. Historians still argue whether the Greeks prioritized philosophical purity over observational accuracy, or if their tools simply weren't precise enough to truly challenge their cherished models. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a delicate dance between what they believed should be and what they could actually see. You drift now, past the perfect crystalline spheres spun by Plato's mind, past Aristotle's unblemished heavens, beyond even the meticulous priests of Babylon and the Nile's cosmic calendar. The air cools, carrying the scent of olive groves under a vast, inky canopy. You find yourself standing not on the sun-baked earth of a temple courtyard, nor within the grand, calculating chambers of an ancient academy, but perhaps on a windswept plateau, high above the Aegean Sea, the kind of place where the silence itself hums with the distant thrum of the cosmos. The stars here aren't just pinpricks of light. They pulse, they breathe, they feel impossibly close, like diamonds scattered on black velvet you could almost reach out and brush with your fingertips. And here, in this silent, star-dusted arena, we introduce a figure so colossal, so utterly pivotal to our understanding of the heavens, yet so frustratingly, almost comically, absent from our immediate historical grasp, that he's become less a man and more a whispered legend. Imagine, if you will, the greatest mind of his age dedicated to mapping the entire night sky. not with the whirring gears and magnified lenses of modern observatories, but with bronze instruments, sharp eyes, and an intellect so profound it still echoes through scientific thought millennia later. This, my sleepy celestial cartographer, is Hipparchus of Nicaea, the shadowed genius, the undisputed grandmaster of ancient astronomy. He lived, we believe, predominantly in Rhodes around the middle of the 2nd century BCE, flourishing during an era when the intellectual currents of the Hellenistic world were at their absolute peak. While you were probably busy perfecting your planking technique or figuring out how to make avocado toast, Hipparchus was busy reinventing how humanity looked at the stars. He didn't just observe. He systematized, he quantified, he theorized with a rigor that puts many later astronomers to shame. His reputation is colossal, his impact undeniable, yet frustratingly, almost none of his own writings survive directly. It's like knowing Shakespeare existed only through Hamlet summaries written by his slightly less talented cousin. We piece together his brilliance mainly through the works of later astronomers, most notably Claudius Ptolemy, who, over 2 centuries later, codified much of Hipparchus's work in his monumental Almagest. Think of Ptolemy as the ancient world's best documentarian, whose subject, Hipparchus, was the uncredited, enigmatic rock star whose original tapes were all lost in a dusty attic flood. Now, pause for a moment and consider the sheer audacity of his task. He wasn't just charting constellations for pretty pictures. He was measuring stellar positions with an accuracy that remained unsurpassed for over a millennium. His most famous achievement, the one that makes modern astronomers still nod in reverent appreciation, was the discovery of the precession of the equinoxes. This isn't some abstract, dusty academic concept. It's the slow, imperceptible wobble of Earth's axis, causing the apparent positions of the stars to shift over vast stretches of time. Hipparchus, by comparing his own meticulously recorded observations with older Babylonian and even earlier Greek records, noticed a minute, consistent shift in the celestial coordinates of stars relative to the equinoxes. He deduced that the entire celestial sphere was slowly, majestically shifting its orientation. Imagine spotting that without a telescope, without digital clocks, without even a decent pair of binoculars. You probably wouldn't survive this for more than 5 minutes, much less uncover a fundamental astronomical phenomenon. He was, in essence, tuning into the faint, ancient hum of Earth's incredibly slow cosmic dance. This discovery alone cemented his place as arguably the greatest observational astronomer of antiquity. But he didn't stop there. He is widely credited with being the first to apply systematic trigonometry to astronomy, laying down the mathematical framework for calculating celestial positions. Before him, stargazing was more descriptive. After him, it became predictive, a science built on numbers and precise angles. He compiled the first known comprehensive star catalog, listing the coordinates and brightnesses of at least 850 stars, possibly more, a painstaking, year-after-year endeavor that required unparalleled patience and observational skill. Some historians still argue whether his star catalog was purely based on his own observations, or if he incorporated earlier, now lost, catalogs, perhaps even from the Babylonians, refining and adding to them. It's a debate that highlights the shadowed aspect of his genius, as his methods are as legendary as his results. One quirky tidbit, often debated, concerns the impetus for his star catalog. While practical applications for navigation and calendar making were always present, Popular legend suggests he was spurred to create his catalog after witnessing a new star, a nova, suddenly appear in the sky. If true, it was a sudden, dramatic event that underscored the need for a fixed reference of the unchanging stars, against which such transient phenomena could be noted. It's a lovely thought, isn't it? A single, unexpected celestial flicker igniting a monumental scientific quest. Whether it was a nova, a comet, or just an exceptionally clear night, that drive for meticulous recording changed everything. Hipparchus also refined methods for predicting lunar and solar eclipses, calculated the length of the year with astonishing accuracy, within minutes of the modern value, and even attempted to determine the distances to the sun and moon. His instruments were basic by our standards: armillary spheres, dioptra, and gnomons, essentially sticks in the ground to measure shadows. Yet, with these simple tools, his extraordinary intellect, and an almost superhuman dedication to precision, he transformed astronomy from a descriptive art into a predictive science. He was the one who pulled back the curtain, not just on what was visible, but on the invisible forces at play, the subtle shifts and grand cycles that govern our cosmic neighborhood. And though his own voice is largely silent to us now, his legacy hums on, a foundational melody in the grand symphony of celestial mechanics. Rhodes Star Workshop. Envision his observatory on Rhodes, using rudimentary but precise instruments. You are here, perched on the sun-baked slopes of Rhodes, not in some grand, marble-clad academic institution, but rather a modest, perhaps even rustic, workshop where the very fabric of the cosmos is being meticulously unraveled. The air, even at night, retains the warmth of the day, a gentle breeze wafting up from the Aegean, carrying the scent of wild thyme and the distant murmur of waves against the shore. Above, the sky is an inky canvas, so dense with stars it feels as though you could reach out and pluck them like ripe fruit. This isn't just a place for looking up. It's a factory of discovery, a silent forge where abstract points of light are hammered into quantifiable data. Imagine the quiet intensity, the rhythmic click of adjustments, the whispered calculations. You stand beside a figure whose gaze is as sharp as a falcon's, yet softened by an infinite patience. This is Hipparchus, and this humble space, perhaps little more than a carefully leveled stone platform with a few well-placed sighting posts, is his universe. No towering domes here, no motorized tracking mounts humming softly. This is an observatory built on ingenuity, a triumph of human intellect over technological limitations. You watch as he meticulously lines up a dioptra. Think of it as a fancy sighting tube with crosshairs, almost like a primitive rifle scope, but for stars. It's fixed, often to a larger circle marked with degrees, allowing him to measure the precise angular distance between celestial objects. It's all about the angles, the tiny shifts, the imperceptible movements that, over time, reveal the grand dance of the heavens. The main instruments are deceptively simple. There's the armillary sphere, a beautiful skeletal globe made of rings representing the celestial equator, the ecliptic, and the meridians, all carefully aligned with the cardinal directions. It looks like a giant, metallic ball of yarn if the yarn was made of brass and intended to map the cosmos. You can almost hear the soft creak of the rings as they're adjusted, mirroring the celestial dance above. Then there's the gnomon, just a vertical stick or pillar casting a shadow. Simple, right? But the length and direction of that shadow, measured throughout the day and year, reveal everything from local noon to the solstices. It's the ultimate low-tech timekeeper and season tracker. Hipparchus, with these tools, was performing feats that would make modern astronomers weep with admiration. Or possibly just offer him a very strong cup of coffee and a laptop. Because, let's be honest, trying to chart every single visible star with what amounts to a glorified protractor and a stick takes a level of dedication that most of us reserve for binge-watching our favorite shows. He moves with a practiced grace, his hands, calloused and strong, manipulating the brass and wood with an almost surgical precision. He's not just looking. He's measuring, recording, building a database in his mind, and probably on countless papyrus scrolls. Each star, each planetary position, each lunar eclipse, a data point carefully etched into his cosmic ledger. You might think, what's the big deal? Just look up. But the challenge lies in the accuracy. Imagine trying to measure the precise location of a distant street light from your window, but your ruler is floppy, your window keeps moving, and the street light winks in and out. That's a rough approximation of the challenges he faced. And if you messed up a star chart back then, you didn't just get a bad grade. If you were a sailor relying on it, you probably won't survive this journey across the open sea. One of the mainstream historical facts that stands out like a supernova in his legacy is his creation of the first known comprehensive star catalog. We're talking about an inventory of over 1,000 stars, meticulously listed with their celestial coordinates and brightness. This wasn't just a pretty picture of the sky. It was a foundational database that would influence astronomy for centuries. It's the ancient equivalent of the first Google Maps, but for stars, and without the helpful voice telling you to turn left in 500 light years. The quirky, almost fringe tidbit about his methods is the sheer precision he achieved, often within a quarter of a degree, using instruments that, to our eyes, seem impossibly crude. He was able to detect minute changes in celestial positions that hinted at movements invisible to the naked eye over a single lifetime. It's like trying to measure the growth of your fingernails from across the room using only a ruler made of spaghetti, and succeeding. Historians still argue whether his star catalog was primarily for navigation, astrological prediction, or purely for the advancement of astronomical science. Some lean towards navigation, given the maritime prowess of roads, while others emphasize the purely academic pursuit of knowledge. What's undeniable is the sheer monumental effort involved. Imagine the countless clear nights spent under the Rhodian sky, the steady hand, the unwavering focus. He wasn't just charting the stars. He was laying the groundwork for all future understanding of cosmic mechanics. You feel the chill of the late-night air now, a testament to the hours passing unnoticed in his quiet workshop. The faint glow of a small oil lamp illuminates the papyrus where he jots down observations, a tiny beacon in the vast darkness. The sound of his steady breath, the rustle of his robes, the subtle hum of the island's nocturnal creatures, these are the ambient sounds of genius at work. He's comparing his current readings to those of earlier Babylonian and Egyptian records, searching for discrepancies, for patterns, for the grand cosmic design. He's asking questions that won't be fully answered for millennia, but he's providing the data, the empirical evidence, that will eventually allow others to piece together the celestial puzzle. This isn't just about observing, it's about predicting. It's about taking the chaotic beauty of the night sky and imposing order upon it, transforming wonder into wisdom. It's about creating a timeless map for generations yet unborn, a guide to a universe that, even today, continues to surprise and confound us. His star workshop was more than just a physical location. It was a state of mind, a testament to the unyielding human desire to understand our place in the grand, silent expanse above. You're there with him now, aren't you? The cool night air of Rhodes whispers across your skin, carrying the scent of salt and distant pine. Above, the sky is a velvet curtain, punctured by 1,000,000 diamond points, each one a silent sentinel in the vast cosmic ocean. Hipparchus stands, a silhouette against this impossible canvas, his brow furrowed in concentration, his hands moving with the deliberate grace of a seasoned artisan. He's not just observing, he's measuring. He's not merely looking. He's cataloging. This isn't just a passion project. It's the genesis of a monumental undertaking, an ambition so audacious you'd think it was whispered to him by the gods themselves. You watch as he sights along the primitive but remarkably precise armillary sphere, its bronze rings catching the faint moonlight. Each careful adjustment, each recorded degree, minute, and second of arc, is a battle won against the inherent chaos of the unmapped heavens. Imagine trying to do this yourself, with nothing but rudimentary tools, a clear sky, and an infinite supply of patience. You'd probably give up after the third star, curse the lack of Wi-Fi, and definitely wouldn't survive the night without a decent coffee shop nearby. The precision he achieves, however, is almost unbelievable for the era, like hitting a bull's blindfolded while riding a unicycle. He's not just marking down positions. He's creating the very first comprehensive star catalog known to history. Before Hipparchus, scattered observations existed, fragmented records from Mesopotamian priests charting their omens, or Egyptian astrologers linking stars to the rise and fall of the Nile. But no one had ever attempted to systematically record the celestial sphere in its entirety, assigning coordinates to each discernible star, a fixed address in the cosmic postal service. Think about that for a moment. The ultimate pre-GPS navigation system, laid out across millions of light years. It's like building Google Maps with a quill pen and a really, really good memory. The sheer volume of work is staggering. He's not just charting the brightest stars, the obvious landmarks of the night sky. He's pushing the limits of naked-eye observation, meticulously recording stars down to the very edge of visibility. We're talking about approximately 1022 stars, each painstakingly plotted with its celestial latitude and longitude. And if you think that sounds like a job for a team of dedicated apprentices, well, you'd be right to a degree. But the guiding intellect, the unyielding vision, was all Hipparchus. He was the project manager, the lead engineer, and the quality control department, all rolled into one toga-clad, brilliant package. This wasn't just a list of pretty lights. Each entry in his lost catalog, though we only know it through later references, would have included a star's apparent magnitude, its brightness. This was a crucial innovation, allowing astronomers to quantify what they saw, moving beyond subjective descriptions to measurable data. He established a system of magnitudes that, astonishingly, forms the basis of the system we still use today, where brighter stars have lower numbers. So, if you ever hear an astronomer talk about a first magnitude star, you can nod sagely and whisper, "Ah, yes, Hipparchus's legacy." He essentially invented the cosmic brightness scale, which is pretty neat for someone who didn't even have a decent light meter. The motivation for this colossal undertaking is a subject of endless fascination. The mainstream historical fact is that this catalog served as a baseline, a snapshot of the heavens at a specific moment in time. This fixed map allowed future astronomers to detect any changes, any shifts, any new celestial visitors. And indeed, it was this very need for a baseline that may have sparked the entire endeavor. The quirky or fringe tidbit goes that the impetus for his star catalog was the appearance of a new star, A nova, in 134 BC. Imagine the shock, the awe, the existential crisis of seeing a new light blaze forth in the supposedly immutable heavens. This rogue star, appearing where no star had been before, might have been the catalyst, compelling Hipparchus to record every single visible star, just in case another one decided to pop up unannounced. "Well, that's rude," he might have grumbled. "I better write all this down so we know if any more unexpected guests arrive." Historians still argue whether the nova was the sole reason, or if the catalog was simply the logical culmination of his relentless pursuit of astronomical accuracy. Regardless, this meticulous mapping allowed him to make an even more profound discovery, one that revealed the subtle, slow dance of the entire celestial sphere. By comparing his own observations with older Babylonian and even earlier Greek records, he noticed a minute, almost imperceptible shift in the positions of the equinoxes. This wasn't just a star moving. It was the entire celestial coordinate system gradually precessing, like a slightly wobbling top. It's a phenomenon so subtle that detecting it with his instruments is akin to noticing a glacier melt from across a continent. His star catalog, then, was not merely a list. It was the Rosetta Stone of celestial mechanics, enabling him to decipher the precession of the equinoxes, a slow, stately wobble of Earth's axis that changes the apparent position of the stars over millennia. This discovery alone would secure his place in the pantheon of scientific giants, a testament to his observational prowess and his relentless pursuit of understanding. You can almost hear the soft scratching of his stylus on a wax tablet. Each mark a silent declaration against the vast, indifferent cosmos. He was building a foundation, brick by cosmic brick, for all future astronomers to stand upon, a silent testament to the genius who mapped the stars before telescopes even existed. Unveiling procession, you stand beside him, a silent shadow in the flickering lamplight of his Rhodes workshop, the very air thick with the scent of parchment and late-night contemplation. Remember that monumental star catalog he was painstakingly crafting, the one charting the precise positions of nearly 1,000 celestial pinpricks. Well, imagine the quiet hum of intense focus, broken only by the scratching of stylus on wax tablet, the rustle of papyrus unrolling. Hipparchus, this solitary genius, isn't just adding new stars to his meticulous list. He's doing something far more revolutionary. He's looking back, tracing lines through time, comparing his fresh, crisp data with the smudged, ancient observations of Babylonian and Egyptian astronomers, records that whisper across centuries. And what he sees, or rather, what he doesn't see where he expects to, sends a ripple of unease through his formidable intellect. It's like rearranging your bookshelf, only to find that your favorite trilogy, the one you always knew was on the top shelf, has inexplicably migrated to the bottom without anyone ever touching it. Except in this cosmic rearrangement, we're talking about the fixed, eternal stars. For millennia, humanity had gazed upon the night sky as an immutable canvas, a perfect, unchanging sphere. Even the Greeks, with their elegant celestial spheres, considered the fixed stars to be just that, fixed. But Hipparchus is starting to suspect they aren't. Not precisely. He notes something peculiar when he compares his coordinates for certain stars, particularly those near the ecliptic, that imaginary path the sun appears to take across the sky, with the positions recorded by astronomers like Hipparchus of Alexandria some 150 years prior. there's a tiny, almost imperceptible shift. It's not much, perhaps a degree or two, but it's consistent, and it's always in the same direction. Imagine trying to spot a flea on a cat at 100 paces in the dark during a sandstorm. That's roughly the observational challenge he's up against. And frankly, you probably won't survive this if you lack his level of superhuman patience. This isn't just observational error, he deduces. This is a systematic drift. The entire celestial sphere, or at least the framework by which we measure it, seems to be subtly, slowly rotating. He likens it in his mind to a spinning top that, as it slows down, begins to wobble. Not the top itself falling over, but its axis, the imaginary line it spins around, describes a slow circle. This, my sleepy friend, is the groundbreaking discovery of precession of the equinoxes. Essentially, the Earth isn't just spinning on its axis like a perfect, stable basketball. No, it's actually wobbling ever so slightly, like a slightly off-kilter top, tracing a grand, slow circle in the sky. This wobble means that the celestial pole, the point around which the stars appear to revolve, isn't always pointing at the same spot in the sky. It slowly, glacially, traces out its own cosmic circle. Today, our North Star is Polaris, a convenient beacon for navigators. But in Hipparchus's time, Thuban, a star in the constellation Draco, was much closer to the celestial pole. And in another 12,000 years or so, it will be Vega's turn. It's like the universe's slowest, grandest game of musical chairs, and the music plays for 26,000 years per song. This discovery wasn't a sudden flash of insight, mind you. It was the result of incredibly diligent, tedious work. Mainstream historical fact: Hipparchus, comparing his precise measurements with earlier astronomical observations, became the first known person to discover and quantify the precession of the equinoxes. He calculated this shift to be about 1 degree every 72 years, which, for a guy with no telescopes and certainly no GPS, is ridiculously accurate. The actual rate is closer to 1 degree every 71.6 years. So, he was off by a hair's breadth, which is pretty good when your primary tools are an armillary sphere and your own incredibly sharp eyes. A quirky tidbit that often gets overlooked is just how reliant he was on the accuracy of those older observations. Imagine those Babylonian priests. Remember them with their meticulous clay tablets and their focus on omens. Turns out, their centuries of careful stargazing, despite their different motivations, provided the long-term data baseline that allowed Hipparchus to spot this subtle shift. Without those ancient records, this discovery might have remained hidden for much longer. Historians still argue whether Hipparchus solely relied on Timacharis's data, or if he had access to a wider array of older astronomical records from Babylon and Egypt. Regardless, his ability to synthesize and interpret this disparate information was nothing short of miraculous. This discovery wasn't just an intellectual curiosity. It had profound implications. It meant that the fixed stars weren't truly fixed in relation to the Earth's seasonal calendar. The zodiacal signs, which mark the position of the sun at the equinoxes and solstices, slowly but surely shifted over time. If you think about it, your astrological sign, if you believe in such things, isn't where the sun actually was when you were born in relation to the constellation for that sign. Blame precession for that cosmic confusion. This wobble, this slow gyration of our planet, fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. It added a layer of dynamic movement to the seemingly unchanging heavens, hinting at a universe far more intricate and alive than anyone had dared to imagine. And it was Hipparchus, the unsung genius of roads, who first pulled back the veil. Trigonometry's first spark. Detail his pivotal role in developing trigonometry for astronomical calculations. You're there, on the breezy island of Rhodes, the scent of salt and dry earth clinging to your clothes. The sun has dipped, painting the sky in fiery hues that quickly fade to the deep, inky canvas of night. Above you, the familiar constellations begin to emerge, twinkling like distant jewels scattered across black velvet. You've seen them countless times, tracked their slow, predictable dance. But now, with Hipparchus, it's not just about watching. It's about knowing. It's about plunging into the deepest waters of mathematical precision, where every degree, every arc, every subtle shift holds the key to the universe's grand design. You remember those meticulous instruments he had, the armillary sphere, the diopter tools for seeing and measuring angles. But seeing is one thing, predicting is another. Imagine trying to predict where a thrown ball will land if you only know how far it's traveled along a curved path, but not the angle it took or the straight-line distance to its target. You'd be guessing, and in the cosmos, guessing is a luxury Hipparchus couldn't afford. He needed to translate the curved paths of celestial bodies, the vast distances of the night sky, into hard numbers. He needed a bridge from the observed world of circles and arcs to the calculated world of points and distances. And that bridge, my sleepy friend, was trigonometry. Before Hipparchus, astronomy was largely descriptive. Babylonians charted, Egyptians observed, Greeks theorized. But when it came to precisely predicting future events like an eclipse, not just that it would happen, but exactly when and where, they hit a wall. Their geometry, fantastic for flat surfaces, stumbled on the spherical canvas of the sky. It's like trying to navigate a round Earth with a flat map, only you don't even have a map yet, just a very keen eye and a hope. And that, dear listener, is where the genius of Hipparchus truly sparked. He understood that to navigate the celestial sphere, you needed a new kind of math, one that dealt with triangles on curved surfaces. You see him hunched over his work, not with parchment or quill as we know them, but perhaps on wax tablets or papyrus, etching and re-etching, his brow furrowed in concentration. He's wrestling with circles, with angles, with the very fabric of space as he perceives it. His revolutionary idea was simple in concept, but monumental in execution. The table of chords. Picture a circle, a perfect cosmic ring. Now imagine drawing a straight line, a chord between any 2 points on that circle's circumference. The length of that chord changes depending on the angle at the center of the circle, where you, the observer, might be positioned. Hipparchus systematically calculated the length of these chords for every possible angle, or at least for many useful increments. This wasn't just abstract math for kicks. This was the ultimate astronomical cheat sheet. If you could measure the angular distance between 2 stars, or between a star and the horizon, his table told you the corresponding straight-line distance on that imaginary celestial sphere. This allowed him to convert angular measurements from his instruments into linear measurements, and vice versa, making the seemingly infinite sky manageable. It was the ancient world's first function calculator, a proto-scientific revolution tucked away in numerical tables. He created what was essentially the earliest known comprehensive trigonometric table, mapping angles to their corresponding chord lengths in a way that had never been done before with such precision or scope. This allowed him to solve a myriad of astronomical problems, from determining the distances of the sun and moon, though his figures for the sun were significantly off. a testament to the immense difficulty of the task, to plotting the exact positions of stars on his catalog. This work was painstaking, requiring an almost unimaginable level of dedication. Think about it. No calculators, no computers, just geometric constructions, meticulous measurements, and endless arithmetic by hand. If you think your high school math was tough, try doing spherical trigonometry with a reed pen and papyrus in the dim light of an oil lamp, long after everyone else has gone to bed. You probably won't survive this, or at least your eyesight won't. The sheer tedium alone would be a soul-crushing endeavor for most of us. Yet, he persisted, driven by an insatiable curiosity to understand the mechanics of the heavens. This table of chords was the direct ancestor of our modern sine function. You might remember sine from your own school days, perhaps with a groan. Well, without Hipparchus, that groan might have been delayed a few centuries, but the need for such a function was inevitable. His work provided the mathematical backbone for calculating things like the latitude and longitude of stars, predicting planetary motions with greater accuracy, and understanding the nuances of the celestial sphere. This allowed him to refine his understanding of phenomena like the precession of the equinoxes. Remember that wobble we talked about. To precisely quantify such a tiny, slow shift over millennia required an incredibly robust mathematical framework, and his trigonometry was precisely that. Historians still debate the precise extent to which Hipparchus fully conceptualized what we now call trigonometry as a distinct mathematical field, or if his work was a purely practical, albeit revolutionary, toolset derived solely for astronomical needs, laying the groundwork rather than fully formalizing the discipline. Was he just solving problems, or was he building a new language of numbers? Regardless, his methods were so powerful, so effective, that they became the standard for centuries. Ptolemy, the great Alexandrian astronomer who came much later, relied heavily on Hipparchus's trigonometric methods and data in his monumental work, the Almagest, which remained the definitive astronomical text for over 1,000 years. It's hard to overstate the impact of this quiet, methodical work. It wasn't just about mapping stars anymore. It was about mathematically predicting their future. It was the birth of celestial mechanics as a predictive science, all thanks to the humble chord and the genius who dared to calculate its every length. You've just peered into the vastness, cataloging stars with Hipparchus, feeling the cold night air on roads, your fingers numb from sketching constellations. But the stars, for all their distant grandeur, were almost predictable compared to the real celestial diva. The moon, oh, she puts on quite a show, doesn't she? Sometimes a sliver, sometimes a full, radiant orb, traversing the sky with what looks like effortless grace. But if you've ever tried to truly predict her every whim, every subtle acceleration and deceleration, you'd quickly discover she's less a graceful ballerina and more a caffeinated toddler in a ballet recital full of surprising, erratic moves. Imagine trying to map that. It's enough to make you want to throw your astrolabe into the Aegean Sea. For Hipparchus, the moon was the ultimate test of his astronomical prowess, a celestial puzzle box with infinite hidden compartments. You see, the moon's orbit around Earth isn't a perfect circle. It's an ellipse, meaning sometimes she's closer to us, sometimes farther away. And when she's closer, she moves faster, pulled by Earth's gravity like a kid on a slingshot. When she's farther, she slows down. This varying speed, called the equation of the center by later astronomers, was just the first layer of her mysterious dance. Then there are the gravitational tugs from the sun, constantly nudging her, pulling her off her expected path, causing slight wobbles and tilts. It's like trying to navigate a boat in choppy waters while someone keeps subtly changing the currents and the wind direction. You probably won't survive this if your survival depends on precise lunar phase prediction. Let's just say that. This wasn't just an academic exercise for Hipparchus. Predicting the moon's exact position was vital for understanding eclipses, those awe-inspiring, often terrifying, moments when the sun or moon momentarily vanished. It was also crucial for timekeeping, for calendrical accuracy, and, for later generations, for navigation across vast, featureless oceans. So, our man Hipparchus, with his legendary observational rigor, turned his gaze from the relatively stable stars to the moon's bewildering antics. He already had his groundbreaking understanding of trigonometry. Remember that spark we talked about? He unleashed that mathematical power on the moon, like a cosmic detective determined to find order in chaos. He meticulously recorded observations for years, possibly even decades, building on Babylonian records, those Mesopotamian sky charts you heard about, stretching back centuries. He knew that patterns repeated, even in the moon's erratic dance. One of his monumental achievements, a mainstream historical fact that often gets overshadowed by his star catalog, was refining the length of the synodic month, the time it takes for the moon to go from one new moon to the next. His calculated value was within mere seconds of what modern atomic clocks measure. Think about that for a second. A guy without a telescope, without a digital stopwatch, nailing down a celestial cycle with that level of precision. It's almost spooky. He was basically the ancient world's most intense moon tracker, probably muttering things like, "Just 5 more seconds, darling, then you're officially late." To account for the moon's varying speed, Hipparchus developed sophisticated models. While the exact details of his geometric models are lost to us, later astronomers, most notably Ptolemy, built upon his work, crediting him extensively. It's thought that Hipparchus employed a clever system of epicycles and deferents, or perhaps eccentric circles. Imagine a smaller circle, the epicycle, whose center moves along a larger circle, the deferent. This ingenious mechanism allowed him to approximate the moon's speeding up and slowing down, making its projected path match his observations more closely. It was like fitting a very complex, multi-layered gear system to the heavens. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some historians speculate that Hipparchus might have even detected the moon's evection, a more subtle variation in its orbit caused by the sun's disturbing influence, though it was Ptolemy who clearly described it later. If so, it speaks volumes about his incredible observational acuity. He wasn't just looking at the moon, he was listening to its silent, gravitational whispers, and the debates still echo down the centuries. Historians still argue whether his lunar models were entirely geometric, a pure expression of Greek mathematical philosophy, or relied heavily on arithmetic sequences derived from the vast, patient observations of the Babylonians, a fusion of two great astronomical traditions. Was it more elegant geometry or gritty empirical number crunching? The truth, as ever, is probably a bit of both, like trying to decide if your favorite dessert is better with chocolate or caramel when it clearly needs both. He wasn't content with just a general idea. He wanted precision. He wanted to know definitively when that next new moon would hide its face, or when the full moon would cast its silvery glow on the waves of the Aegean. This was painstaking work, requiring countless nights under the stars, logging positions, noting discrepancies, and then retreating to his study to adjust his mathematical constructs. It's not exactly thrilling reality TV, is it? More like watching celestial paint dry, except the paint is constantly shifting and sometimes explodes into a brilliant eclipse. And all this was done without the benefit of a telescope, just sightlines, armillary spheres, and an intellect as sharp as any modern supercomputer. You can imagine him, probably pulling an all-nighter fueled by. Well, we don't know what fueled him, probably just sheer intellectual curiosity and perhaps some strong ancient Greek coffee, if they had it. His work on the moon cemented his reputation as the preeminent astronomer of the ancient world. He took something seemingly chaotic and began to impose order, to write down the rules of its cosmic dance, setting the stage for centuries of astronomical thought. He laid the foundation, a true unsung genius, building the very scaffolding that others, like Ptolemy, would then use to construct the grand edifice of ancient astronomy. All thanks to his obsessive pursuit of the moon's erratic, beautiful, and utterly compelling performance. Solar years' precision, you feel the gentle tug of the moon, a familiar ghostly hand in the sky, guiding tides and lovers. Its phases a comforting, if sometimes puzzling, rhythm. But imagine for a moment, shifting your gaze from that silver orb, that celestial disco ball, towards the relentless, blinding brilliance of the sun. It's a different beast entirely, isn't it? The moon, for all its drama and phases, is predictable in its whims, a cosmic pendulum swinging back and forth. The sun, though, it's the grand maestro, dictating seasons, orchestrating harvests, shaping migration patterns, and ultimately dictating survival itself. And for Hipparchus, this fiery orb presented a challenge as grand, if not grander, than anything he'd tackled with the moon's erratic dance. He needed to nail down the length of the solar year, not just for academic curiosity, but because civilizations quite literally rose and fell on the back of knowing precisely when to plant, when to flood, when to hunker down. Miss a season, miscalculate the planting window by a few weeks, and you probably won't survive this. No Amazon prime for ancient famines, friend. Think about it. For millennia, humanity had a rough idea of the year. The Egyptians had their 365-day calendar. The Babylonians had their lunisolar calendars juggling moon and sun. But rough idea doesn't cut it when your entire society hinges on agricultural cycles. It's like having a watch that's pretty close, until you miss your flight to Rome or show up a week late for your own birthday party. For Hipparchus, pretty close was an astronomical insult. He sought precision, a meticulous accounting of the sun's journey from one vernal equinox to the next. What exactly is an equinox, you ask, perhaps stifling a yawn? It's that magical moment, twice a year, when the sun crosses the celestial equator, and day and night are roughly equal in length. Easy to say, fiendishly difficult to pinpoint precisely, especially with ancient instruments. Imagine trying to catch a mosquito mid-flight with a pair of chopsticks in the dark. That's roughly the observational challenge. He wasn't just relying on looks about even with his shadow stick. Hipparchus, up on Rhodes, likely employed his trusty armillary sphere, that intricate skeleton of celestial rings you remember, or perhaps a gnomon, a simple vertical stick whose shadow length at local noon would betray the sun's exact height. By carefully charting the daily movement of the sun's shadow, particularly around the crucial spring and autumn equinoxes, he could track its journey along the ecliptic, that apparent path the sun traces across the stars over a year. His genius lay in not just making new observations, but in meticulously comparing them with older records. He wasn't just a data collector. He was the ancient world's greatest data analyst. He dug through the astronomical observations of Meton and Euctemon from 5th century BC Athens, scrutinizing their equinox timings. He cross-referenced with Callippus, another Greek astronomer who had attempted to refine the calendar cycle. And crucially, he delved into the vast, dusty clay tablet libraries of Babylonian observations, stretching back centuries. This was where the real intellectual heavy lifting happened, identifying the slight discrepancies, the subtle shifts, the tiny errors that accumulated over time like cosmic dust bunnies. This comparative analysis allowed him to refine the length of the tropical year, the time it takes for the sun to return to the same position relative to the equinoxes. He calculated it to be approximately 365 days, 5 hours, and 55 minutes. Now, let's be frank, that's just shy of 365.25 days. The true value, as we know it today, is closer to 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45 seconds. So he was off by about 6 minutes. 6 minutes. In an era without atomic clocks, without telescopes, without even accurate timekeeping devices beyond sundials and water clocks, being off by only 6 minutes over an entire year is less an error and more a feat of observational prowess that borders on the miraculous. It's like throwing a dart across a football field and hitting the bulls on a miniature dartboard. You probably couldn't do it today with all your fancy gadgets. This seemingly small refinement had monumental implications. An accurate length of the year allowed for more precise calendar systems, crucial for synchronizing agricultural cycles, religious festivals, and governmental administration. No more arguing with your neighbor about whether it's truly time to harvest or if you're still a week early. His work provided the foundational data that later Roman reforms, like the Julian calendar, would rely upon, although they initially settled for a simpler 365.25-day year, adding a leap day every 4 years. It highlighted the subtle yet continuous drift between the observational reality and the assumed, simpler models. Historians still argue whether Hipparchus solely relied on his own fresh observations or meticulously cross-referenced vast troves of older Babylonian and Egyptian data, painstakingly correcting for any observational drift over centuries. But regardless of the exact recipe, the result was a leap forward in understanding time itself. His determination of the solar year also played a silent but significant role in his groundbreaking discovery of precession, that slow, majestic wobble of the Earth's axis that shifts the equinoxes over millennia. You remember that quiet hum of the Earth's pole making tiny circles in the sky. He wouldn't have spotted that without first nailing down the length of the year with such uncanny accuracy. Because once you know how long the year should be, and you notice the equinoxes aren't quite where they were supposed to be based on older star maps, you know something fundamental is shifting. It's like carefully measuring the length of a year, and then noticing that the Christmas decorations arrive a little earlier each year. You'd know something was up with the calendar, wouldn't you? And just like a good detective, Hipparchus used his meticulous data to unravel this cosmic mystery. You trace your fingers over the faint, almost ghostly script on the papyrus. Or perhaps it's vellum now, depending on how long you've been wandering these dusty, forgotten archives of the mind. The air here, in this mental Alexandria, is thick with the scent of dried ink and forgotten ambitions. You're standing, in essence, at the threshold of a historical controversy that, frankly, could have earned someone a lifetime ban from the ancient academic equivalent of Twitter. We're talking about Claudius Ptolemy, the behemoth of Alexandrian astronomy, who lived nearly 3 centuries after our star mapping maestro, Hipparchus. And his magnum opus, the Almagest, well, let's just say it's less an original symphony and more a masterful remix, heavily featuring the uncredited samples of a certain Rhodian genius. Imagine Ptolemy, there in his bustling library, surrounded by scrolls and perhaps a perpetually confused scribe. He's compiling, synthesizing, and some would argue outright copying. The Almagest becomes the astronomical Bible for the next 1400 years, a colossal testament to the geocentric universe, placing Earth squarely at the center of everything, with the celestial bodies dutifully revolving around us. It's elegant, it's comprehensive, and it's almost entirely built on the intellectual scaffolding laid down by Hipparchus. You see, when we talked about Hipparchus's lost star catalog, that wasn't just a lamentable footnote. It was the setup for this grand reveal. Because while Hipparchus's original work vanished into the sands of time, its echo, some say its direct mirror image, lives on within the pages of the Almagest. Consider the star catalog itself, the crown jewel of both astronomers' legacies. Ptolemy's Almagest lists over 1,000 stars, meticulously categorized by their apparent brightness, their magnitudes, and their celestial coordinates. Now, if you were to painstakingly recalculate those positions backward in time, accounting for the phenomenon of precession that Hipparchus himself discovered, you'd find that Ptolemy's catalog aligns with astonishing precision to where Hipparchus would have observed them around 129 BC. It's almost too perfect, isn't it? As if Ptolemy simply took Hipparchus's coordinates, updated them for the slow celestial wobble, and presented them as his own. It's a bit like buying a vintage car, repainting it, and then claiming you invented the combustion engine. You probably wouldn't survive the ensuing rage from the mechanic, let alone the history buffs. Then there's the precession of the equinoxes, that slow, stately wobble of Earth's axis that changes the apparent position of the stars over millennia. Remember how Hipparchus was the first to nail this down? Well, Ptolemy uses Hipparchus's incredibly accurate value for the rate of precession, without any apparent remeasurement or refinement. If he were making his own comprehensive observations from scratch, wouldn't he have arrived at his own, possibly slightly different figure? It's not just a passing nod. It's a foundational pillar of his calculations that he seems to have simply adopted. It's like building a skyscraper and just accepting someone else's calculations for the foundation without even a single recheck. A tad trusting, perhaps, or perhaps simply relying on the best data available, which, inconveniently for modern notions of academic originality, happen to be Hipparchus's. And the lunar models. Oh, the moon's erratic dance, a celestial ballet that has puzzled astronomers for millennia. Hipparchus, you recall, created sophisticated models to predict its complex movements, accounting for its varying speed and its orbital inclination. Ptolemy, in the Almagest, presents an even more refined and detailed lunar theory. But the fundamental structure, the epicycles and deferents and equants, all seem to grow directly out of Hipparchus's groundbreaking work. It's a continuum, yes, but the question is always, where does the inheritance end and the innovation begin? Historians still argue whether Ptolemy was a brilliant synthesizer who refined and preserved ancient knowledge, or if he was, to put it mildly, a bit of an intellectual magpie, collecting the shinies of others and presenting them as his own. The quirky tidbit in all this? Some scholars point to specific star listings in Ptolemy's catalog that seem oddly out of place for his time. For instance, there are stars listed that, due to precession, would have been below the horizon in Alexandria during Ptolemy's era, but would have been visible from Rhodes, where Hipparchus observed. It's almost as if Ptolemy was so committed to reproducing the Rhodian view of the sky that he inadvertently included stars. He couldn't actually see from his own vantage point. It's a bit like claiming you hiked Mount Everest, but still having sand in your boots from your beach vacation. The fact is, the Almagest is a colossal work, a mathematical and observational tour de force that dominated astronomical thought for over 1,000 years. It's filled with Ptolemy's own mathematical derivations, his explanations of planetary motion, and his own geographical insights. He wasn't just a copyist, but when you delve into the heart of his observational data, especially the star catalog, the shadow of Hipparchus looms so large it's almost impossible to ignore. It makes you wonder, if the internet had existed back then, would there have been a Ptolemygate scandal, complete with ancient memes of a blushing Ptolemy holding up a borrowed scroll? Probably. And it would have been glorious. So, while Ptolemy gets all the credit for the Almagest, remember that much of the brilliance you find within its pages, particularly the meticulous mapping of the stars and the understanding of the moon's fickle nature, truly belongs to the unsung genius of Hipparchus. Ptolemy was the librarian who brought the stories to the masses, but Hipparchus was the original storyteller, the intrepid explorer who first charted those distant, shimmering cosmic shores. And perhaps, as you drift deeper into sleep, you can imagine Ptolemy, late at night, a faint smile playing on his lips as he carefully adjusts another one of Hipparchus's stellar coordinates, gently nudging it into his own grand design. Echoes from antiquity lament the unfortunate loss of most of Hipparchus's original writings. The air here is thick with the silence of centuries, a hush that swallows not just sound, but entire libraries, whole lifetimes of thought. You stand, or rather, float, in the ghostly remains of what was once the vibrant, bustling heart of human knowledge. Dust motes dance in the faint, ethereal light, each one a tiny, shimmering particle of forgotten wisdom. It's a quiet tragedy, this place, where the greatest minds poured their souls onto fragile papyrus and parchment, only for the relentless march of time, or the capricious flick of a torch, to turn it all to ash and memory. You probably fret over losing a single document on your computer, perhaps an unsaved spreadsheet or a particularly witty tweet. Imagine, then, the cold dread, the cosmic injustice of having your entire life's magnum opus, the painstaking observations of a lifetime, the intricate mathematical proofs, the very map of the heavens you painstakingly charted, simply vanish, not deleted with a click, but crumbled, burned, or simply lost to the indifference of ages. You think you've had a bad day when your Wi-Fi cuts out. Try having your entire life's work evaporate into thin air, leaving barely a whisper behind. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? This is the somber echo of Hipparchus, that silent giant we've been whispering about. His name rings through the halls of history, not just for what we know he did, but for the profound, aching void of what we don't. He was a titan, a foundational pillar of astronomy, and yet almost all of his original writings, his direct voice from antiquity, are gone. Poof. Vanished like a rogue sock in the laundry of time. Think of it. A mind so brilliant, so meticulous, so far ahead of his time that his observations would underpin astronomical thought for over 1,000 years. And yet, if you were to wander through an ancient library, hoping to pull out Hipparchus on the stars, or Hipparchus's treatise on chords, you'd find nothing. Or rather, you'd find a profound emptiness where those volumes should be. It's like discovering a blueprint for a miraculous machine. only to realize the inventor's own instructions were lost. And all you have are copies made by someone else who might have tweaked a few things, or perhaps misunderstood the genius. The loss of ancient texts is, sadly, a mainstream historical fact, a gaping wound in our collective memory. The Library of Alexandria, that beacon of knowledge we often romanticize, wasn't just one fire. It suffered multiple damages over centuries. But even beyond that catastrophic narrative, the very medium of knowledge was fragile. Papyrus crumbles, parchment molds, ink fades. Libraries, often unheated and damp, were perfect breeding grounds for decay. Termites, bookworms, and even the simple act of reusing scrolls for less lofty purposes, like wrapping fish or kindling fires, contributed to the slow, agonizing erosion of intellectual heritage. Consider, for instance, the curious case of the palimpsest. Imagine a monk, perhaps in the Middle Ages, needing parchment which was expensive. Instead of buying new, he'd take an old manuscript, perhaps a dusty scientific treatise no longer understood or deemed useful, scrape off the ink, and write new, more relevant, religious texts over the top. It's a bit like someone erasing your groundbreaking scientific paper to write a grocery list on the back of the page. You might accidentally discover some faint, ghost-like letters beneath the surface today, revealing a hidden layer of lost wisdom. Historians have used advanced imaging techniques to recover some of these hidden texts, literally bringing voices from the past back to life, though it's a painstaking process and only recovers fragments. And this is where the scholarly debate truly heats up. Historians still argue whether Ptolemy, in his monumental Almagest, copied Hipparchus's star catalogue wholesale, perhaps merely updating the longitudes for precession, or if he performed his own independent observations. Was Ptolemy a brilliant synthesizer and original observer? Or was he, as some cynically suggest, more of a skilled editor, heavily reliant on Hipparchus and perhaps not always giving due credit? The fact that we have so little of Hipparchus's direct work means this debate often feels like arguing over shadows, trying to reconstruct a masterpiece from faint reflections in a murky pool. Without Hipparchus's own books, we are left to piece together his brilliance through the lens of others. Ptolemy, whom we discussed before, is our primary window. It's through Ptolemy's Almagest that we glimpse the scale of Hipparchus's achievements. His star catalogue, his calculations for the length of the year, his precession discovery, his methods for measuring the moon's distance. But every time Ptolemy refers to the observations of Hipparchus, or Hipparchus found, you feel a pang of longing. You want to hear it directly from the source, to see his own elegant prose, his own diagrams, his own unfiltered genius. It's like listening to a cover band of your favorite artist. They might be incredibly talented, they might even sound just like the original, but there's still that yearning for the true, raw, authentic performance. The original, the one that truly captured the moment, the one filled with that inimitable spark, is gone. We know of a work called On the Arrangement of the Sphere, and On the Length of the Year, and On the Rising and Setting of the 12 Signs. And critically, on the star catalogue, all credited to Hipparchus, all utterly, completely lost to us. Imagine the insights, the incremental steps of discovery, the dead ends and triumphs that are forever sealed away in those vanished scrolls. The very notion that a figure of such monumental importance could be reduced to scattered fragments and references is, frankly, bewildering. It's a testament to the fragility of knowledge itself. We build these towering edifices of understanding, brick by painstakingly observed brick, and then, without warning, the foundations can simply erode, leaving only the shadow of what once was. It forces you to consider how much of what we know about the ancient world, about any history, is filtered through the interpretations, biases, and perhaps even accidental errors of those who came after. It's a cosmic game of telephone, stretching across millennia. And so, as you drift deeper into this ancient mystery, remember that our understanding of Hipparchus is a jigsaw puzzle with most of the pieces missing. We are forever grateful for the pieces Ptolemy preserved, but we also lament the thousands that time swallowed whole. We see the faint imprint of his intellectual footsteps, but the path itself, his direct journey of discovery, is obscured. It's a silent monument to what was, and what could have been. You breathe a sigh, a tiny wisp of air, as if the sheer weight of what was lost, all of Hipparchus's unadulterated brilliance, presses down on you even now, centuries later. You can almost feel the parchment crumbling, the ink fading, the words whispering away into the dust motes dancing in sunlit ancient libraries. It's a tragic cosmic oversight, isn't it? To have a mind so profound, and for so much of its direct output to simply vanish. But here's the thing about knowledge, especially knowledge as foundational as Hipparchus's celestial blueprints. It doesn't truly disappear. It just hibernates, like a particularly grumpy bear, waiting for the right conditions to re-emerge and stretch its intellectual claws. Imagine the flickering gas lamps in the great libraries of Alexandria, the last vestiges of classical learning, gradually dimming as the Roman Empire began its long, slow, somewhat undignified slump into what some call the Dark Ages. A period, by the way, that if you were living through it, you probably wouldn't survive this, what with the general lack of sanitation and abundance of plague. But while Western Europe was, shall we say, re-evaluating its priorities, mostly how not to get raided by Vikings, something truly extraordinary was blossoming further east. The intellectual torch, far from being extinguished, was being carefully passed, hand to hand, across continents, across cultures, across desert winds, until it ignited a new, brilliant inferno of scholarship. The Islamic Golden Age. You see it now, unfolding before you like a vast, intricately woven tapestry. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, established in the 9th century, isn't just a fancy name for a library. It's a bustling intellectual powerhouse. Imagine scholars from every corner of the known world converging there, their robes rustling with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of lamp oil and fresh ink. Their mission, a truly monumental undertaking, was to seek out, preserve, and translate the collective wisdom of ancient Greece, Persia, India, essentially anyone who'd ever had a brilliant idea and written it down. It's like the ultimate intellectual scavenger hunt, only with less booby traps and more really smart people. And right there, among the texts deemed utterly essential, were the works of the Greek astronomers, most notably Ptolemy's Almagest. Now you remember our old friend Ptolemy, right? The guy who basically repackaged Hipparchus's lost star catalog and astronomical models. Well, it was through these Arabic translations of the Almagest that Hipparchus's genius truly made its grand, if somewhat indirect, comeback. Scholars like the illustrious Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a Christian physician renowned for his linguistic prowess, meticulously translated Greek texts into Syriac, and then into Arabic. Imagine the sheer mental gymnastics involved, painstakingly rendering complex astronomical concepts from one language into another, ensuring every epicycle, every deferent, every obscure star name retained its precise meaning. It's the kind of work that makes your brain ache just thinking about it, but their dedication was absolute. This wasn't just about translation, though. Oh no. That would be like buying a fancy new car and just leaving it in the garage. The scholars of the Islamic world, they took that car, stripped it down, improved the engine, gave it a spoiler, and then took it for a joyride across the cosmos. They didn't just passively absorb, they critically engaged. They checked, rechecked, and then, with characteristic intellectual rigor, improved upon the Hellenistic legacy. Think about it. They had access to centuries of observation data, superior mathematical tools, Arabic numerals and algebra, and an intellectual environment that highly valued scientific inquiry. This was their moment to shine. You walk through their new observatories, not mere wooden platforms on roads, but grand, purpose-built structures in places like Baghdad, Cairo, and later, the famous Maraghe Observatory in Persia. Here, astronomers like Mohammed al-Battani, often Latinized as Albatenius, which sounds like a very fancy type of cheese, meticulously remeasured the precession of the equinoxes, confirming Hipparchus's discovery but refining its rate. Al-Battani also improved Hipparchus's and Ptolemy's values for the obliquity of the ecliptic and the length of the tropical year. He was so good, in fact, that his measurements of the solar year were more accurate than Ptolemy's and remained standard until the time of Copernicus. It's a bit like Hipparchus laid the foundational brickwork, and then these guys came along and built a skyscraper on top of it, complete with air conditioning and Wi-Fi. Consider Abd al-Rahman al-Sufi, a Persian astronomer from the 10th century. You'd think after 1,000 years, everyone would have the stars nailed down, right? Not quite. Al-Sufi, using his own naked-eye observations, meticulously revised Ptolemy's star catalog, correcting magnitudes and adding descriptions of nebulous objects that had gone unnoticed before, like the Andromeda Galaxy, which he called a little cloud. He even sketched their shapes, effectively creating the first illustrated star atlas, the Book of Fixed Stars. Imagine the dedication, night after night, out there under the vast desert sky, making sure every sparkle was in its right place. It makes your casual glance at a weather app seem rather low effort. This era also saw the development of incredible new instruments. You marvel at the intricate astrolabes, sophisticated devices used for everything from telling time to finding prayer directions, charting star positions, and even solving complex trigonometric problems. There were giant mural quadrants, some spanning dozens of meters, used for incredibly precise measurements of celestial altitudes. These weren't just bigger versions of Greek tools. They incorporated new mathematical understanding and engineering principles. Historians still argue whether the Islamic world's instrumental innovations were primarily for refining existing models or pushing towards entirely new cosmological paradigms. Either way, they were certainly not just twiddling their thumbs. Then there's the crucial refinement of mathematics itself. While Hipparchus had pioneered trigonometry for astronomy, it was during the Islamic Golden Age that algebra truly blossomed, providing new and powerful tools to tackle astronomical problems. The development of spherical trigonometry, in particular, allowed for more accurate calculations of celestial positions without relying on Ptolemaic approximations. They were effectively giving the universe a much-needed mathematical upgrade. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. The sheer amount of paper produced during this period, thanks to the introduction of paper-making technology from China. A secret learned from Chinese prisoners of war, ironically. This wasn't just about having more notebooks. It fundamentally changed how knowledge was disseminated and preserved. Imagine going from scarce, expensive parchment to relatively abundant, affordable paper. It made mass production of books, copies of translations, and original treatises possible, fueling the intellectual boom like never before. It was the ancient world's version of the internet, but you had to actually turn pages. Towards the later stages of this golden age, astronomers like Nasir al-Din al-Tusi and Ibn al-Shatir began to critically question the very heart of Ptolemy's system. The equant, that rather clunky mathematical device Ptolemy used to explain variable planetary speeds. They found it philosophically unsatisfying, clashing with the Greek ideal of uniform circular motion. So they devised ingenious new models, like the famous Tusi couple, that could reproduce the observed planetary motions without the offending equant. While still geocentric, these models represented a significant break from Ptolemy and, remarkably, bore striking resemblances to later Copernican planetary models. It's almost as if they were laying the breadcrumbs, guiding future generations towards a heliocentric vision, without quite taking the leap themselves. So, when you consider the lost works of Hipparchus, remember that his echoes resonated for centuries. They traveled through the desert winds, whispered across the pages of translated texts, and sparked the imaginations of brilliant minds in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba. His observations, his methods, his very spirit of rigorous inquiry became the bedrock upon which a new age of astronomical discovery was built. The Islamic Golden Age wasn't just a bridge for ancient knowledge. It was a vibrant, innovative workshop where the cosmic understanding of humanity was not only preserved, but profoundly transformed, setting the stage for the scientific revolution that would eventually follow in Europe. You can almost hear the soft rustle of ancient scrolls being unrolled, the quiet murmur of scholars deep in thought, their minds wrestling with the universe's grandest puzzles, just as Hipparchus once did. Europe's darkened skies you're now pulling away from the sun-drenched, bustling observatories of Baghdad and Cairo, leaving behind the precise astrolabes and meticulously copied manuscripts that preserved the wisdom of Hipparchus. As the cosmic curtain descends, you feel a distinct chill, a literal and figurative plunge into the shadows. Imagine stepping into medieval Europe, not with the gentle hum of a planetarium projector, but with the damp, earthy scent of a flickering tallow candle in a drafty monastery. The light feels dimmer here, doesn't it? The air itself seems thick with a different kind of knowledge, one less concerned with the precise movements of celestial bodies, and far more interested in the state of your immortal soul. You might even find yourself wishing you'd packed a bigger, fur-lined cloak, both for the cold and for the sudden philosophical shivers. The vibrant intellectual pulse that had fueled the great Hellenistic centers, and later the Islamic world, had largely receded in Western Europe. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, a fragmented landscape emerged, rife with instability, constant conflict, and a general collapse of the intricate infrastructure that supported large-scale scholarship. Libraries, once repositories of vast knowledge, either lay in ruins or became scattered across isolated monastic communities. The great philosophical debates that had fueled Hipparchus's drive for precision were largely replaced by a focus on theological interpretation, where the universe was primarily seen as a divine creation, its workings understood through scripture rather than empirical observation. It's not that people stopped looking at the stars entirely. Oh no, they still did. You still needed to know when to plant your crops, when to celebrate religious festivals, and if you were feeling particularly adventurous, which direction to vaguely head in without getting hopelessly lost in a perpetually muddy forest. But the why and the how behind those celestial movements became less of a pressing scientific inquiry and more of a theological one. The intricate mathematical models of the Greeks, the observational rigor of the Babylonians, the sophisticated instruments developed in the East, much of it simply faded from memory, like a half-remembered dream upon waking. Think about it. Hipparchus, laboring over his star catalogue on Rhodes, had the collective wisdom of centuries of Mesopotamian and Egyptian observation at his fingertips, albeit sometimes through a game of intellectual telephone. Here, in the early medieval West, many of those links were severed. It's like trying to bake a magnificent cake when half your recipe is lost, your oven is broken, and you're pretty sure the flour is just dust from the road. You'd probably end up with something vaguely edible, but certainly not a masterpiece. And if you tried to explain the concept of precession to someone back then, their eyes would likely glaze over faster than you can say, geocentric universe. In fact, you might even be burned at the stake for such abstract nonsense, so you probably won't survive this conversation if it were happening back then. Just a little historical reality check for your cozy bedtime. One mainstream historical fact from this period is the profound intellectual isolation that characterized much of Western Europe during the so-called Dark Ages. While the East flourished, Western scholarship largely retreated into monasteries, where classical texts were preserved, but often without the accompanying scientific tradition or the context for their full understanding. The focus shifted to copying and interpreting existing texts, rather than active scientific inquiry or new observation. The intellectual energy that once propelled astronomical discovery was diverted into theological exegesis and the practical concerns of survival and faith. It truly was a period where, if you squinted hard enough at the night sky, you might just see the faint glow of a long-lost intellectual bonfire far, far away, across a very wide sea. Now for a quirky tidbit. During this period, despite the decline in sophisticated astronomy, there was a persistent, almost folksy, fascination with celestial events, often intertwined with superstition. Comets, for instance, were almost universally interpreted as harbingers of doom, war, famine, plague, or the death of a king. If a particularly bright meteor streaked across the sky, you weren't thinking about space dust entering the atmosphere. You were probably convinced the apocalypse was just around the corner. Imagine trying to explain atmospheric re-entry to a group of bewildered villagers, convinced the devil just threw a rock at the moon. It truly highlights the chasm between the empirical observations of Hipparchus and the prevailing worldview of the era. The universe wasn't a clockwork mechanism. It was a stage for divine messages and omens. Historians still argue whether the Dark Ages truly represents a complete intellectual void in astronomy, or if it was more a period of slow incubation, where knowledge was simply held in different, less public, and less developed ways. Some scholars argue that while formal astronomical observation and mathematical modeling certainly regressed, practical sky knowledge persisted among farmers, sailors, and even churchmen for calendrical purposes. However, what is undeniable is the stark contrast with the vibrant astronomical progress seen in the contemporary Islamic world, which actively built upon the Hellenistic legacy that had all but vanished from the Latin West. The sheer scale of the intellectual downturn is hard to overstate. You weren't just stepping back a few centuries. You were stepping back into a different intellectual universe altogether, one where the stars held less scientific mystery and more divine decree. The very concept of a comprehensive star catalog, painstakingly measuring magnitudes and positions, would have seemed utterly alien, perhaps even impious to many. The precision that Hipparchus championed, the meticulous observation, the mathematical rigor, it was a forgotten language, waiting to be rediscovered. And for centuries, Europe largely slept under skies that, though beautiful, were increasingly misunderstood. You feel a subtle tremor beneath your feet, not an earthquake, but the slow, deliberate turning of a vast historical page. The air, which for centuries felt thick with the must of forgotten knowledge and dusty dogma across much of Europe, begins to thin, to clear. Imagine standing in a vast, echoing library, one that has been locked away for generations, filled with scrolls and codices, some half-eaten by mice, others miraculously preserved. The light filtering through the grimy windows is weak at first, then brighter, revealing layers of neglect, but also glints of gold. This, my friend, is the Renaissance reawakening. And if you were a scholar trying to piece together the fragments of ancient wisdom at this time, well, let's just say your job security was inversely proportional to how much you challenged the prevailing dogma. You probably wouldn't survive it, not with your neck intact anyway, especially if your interpretations strayed too far from the accepted theological framework. For what feels like an eternity, Europe had largely forgotten the intellectual giants we've been whispering about. Hipparchus, his brilliant trigonometry, his groundbreaking procession largely relegated to the realm of myth, or simply lost in the chaos following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The vibrant intellectual life of the Islamic Golden Age, which carefully preserved, translated, and built upon these very texts, had been a beacon in the darkness. But its light hadn't fully penetrated the insular, often war-torn, kingdoms of medieval Europe. It's like discovering a treasure map that's been folded up in your attic for centuries, only you can't quite read the language it's written in, and half the landmarks have been renamed. Annoying, isn't it? Almost as annoying as trying to assemble flat-pack furniture with only pictograms for instructions. But then, ever so gradually, the tide began to turn. The Crusades, despite their devastating human cost, inadvertently served as a conduit, a brutal cultural exchange program, if you will. European crusaders and merchants, venturing into the Levant, stumbled upon the intellectual riches of the Islamic world. They found libraries brimming with Aristotle, Ptolemy, Euclid, and yes, even echoes of Hipparchus, all meticulously translated into Arabic. It was a bit like someone finally discovering that the entire collection of Netflix existed, but only if they were willing to trek through a desert and occasionally fight for it. Suddenly, these ancient Greek and Roman texts, once thought lost to the mists of time, started trickling back into Europe. This wasn't a sudden flood, mind you. It was more of a slow, steady drip, initially via Sicily and Spain, where Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars often worked together, a true melting pot of minds. Think of Toledo, in Spain, as a super hub of translation in the 12th century, a place where Arabic manuscripts were rendered into Latin, becoming accessible to a wider European audience. This mainstream historical fact, the Toledo School of Translators, was absolutely crucial. Without them, we might still be debating whether the Earth was flat or just really, really bumpy, or whether the sky was a giant painted dome. Scholars, hungry for knowledge, devoured these rediscovered works. They painstakingly copied manuscripts, sometimes in freezing monastic scriptoria, their fingers numb, their eyes strained by candlelight. You can almost smell the beeswax and damp parchment, overlaid with the faint scent of ink. They were intellectual detectives, piecing together fragments, correcting errors that had crept in over centuries of copying, trying to reconstruct the true meaning of the ancients. It was laborious, meticulous work, the kind that makes you grateful for copy-paste, even if it does occasionally paste a random cat meme into your important report. The effort involved was immense. Imagine having to rewrite entire encyclopedias by hand, knowing one slip of the pen could perpetuate an error for generations. The invention of the printing press in the mid-15th century was nothing short of a revolution. Before Gutenberg, a single copy of Ptolemy's Almagest might take months, even years, to produce by hand, making it a rare and expensive commodity, often reserved for the very wealthy or the most dedicated monastic libraries. Now, suddenly, hundreds, then thousands, could be printed. This meant wider dissemination of knowledge, lower costs, and fewer opportunities for scribal errors to perpetuate inaccuracies. It democratized learning in a way that, frankly, probably terrified some of the old guard. What? Commoners reading complex astronomical texts? The audacity. Next thing you know, they'll be questioning everything. This wasn't just about Ptolemy, remember. His Almagest, as we discussed, was heavily reliant on Hipparchus's lost work. So when scholars got their hands on Almagest, they were, in effect, rediscovering Hipparchus, even if his name wasn't on the cover. They were seeing his meticulous observations, his sophisticated models of the moon, his groundbreaking concept of precession, all filtered through Ptolemy's explanations. It was like getting a brilliant cover song, and then realizing the original artist was even more mind-blowing. But you only ever get to hear the cover. One quirky or fringe tidbit from this era is the almost obsessive focus some scholars had on correcting Ptolemy's star catalog. While Ptolemy was seen as the undisputed master, minor discrepancies in his star positions were noted. Some scholars, believing the original Almagest had been perfect, and that errors were due to corrupted copies, dedicated their lives to restoring the catalog, unaware that many of the original errors likely stemmed from Hipparchus's own, still incredibly impressive observational limitations, given his lack of telescopes, of course. Imagine trying to fix a painting because you think the artist must have meant for that brushstroke to be a different shade of blue, when in reality, they just ran out of that specific pigment, or maybe they just weren't having their best day. The intellectual climate of the Renaissance encouraged observation and a return to original sources, a stark contrast to the medieval emphasis on scholasticism and logical deduction from established texts. While still deeply intertwined with theology, there was a growing appetite for empirical evidence. You see scholars like Regiomontanus, Johann Müller von Königsberg, a towering figure of 15th century astronomy, who not only translated and published the Almagest, but also constructed his own instruments and made his own observations. He effectively set the stage for later breakthroughs by making classical texts widely available and promoting a more observational approach. He was basically the first astronomy influencer, just without the constant need for perfectly lit selfies and sponsored content for quills. Historians still argue whether this reemergence was a truly organic intellectual blossoming, a natural progression stemming from internal European dynamics, or if it was more directly spurred by the economic and political shifts of the time, such as the growth of powerful city-states and the desperate desire for new navigation techniques that spurred interest in accurate celestial charts for ever-expanding trade routes? Was it pure intellectual curiosity, or the practical need for better maps and calendars that truly rekindled the flame? It's a chicken-and-egg question, and honestly, both probably played a part. You can't navigate a ship across an ocean if you don't know where the stars are, can you? Unless you're using a very fancy, historically inaccurate GPS, and you don't mind getting lost in the Sargasso Sea. This slow, painstaking reevaluation of ancient wisdom didn't just bring back old ideas, it sparked new ones. It created a foundation, a launching pad for minds like Nicolaus Copernicus, who, influenced by these very same rediscovered classical texts, began to question the geocentric model that had dominated thought for over a millennium. He wasn't working in a vacuum. He was standing on the shoulders of giants, giants whose writings had been rescued from the dustbin of history and painstakingly brought back into the light. The stage was being set for a revolution, a cosmic paradigm shift that would make us question everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. And you, my sleepy listener, are right there, witnessing the very first faint flickers of that grand upheaval. You've just drifted through the long European night, watching the slow, painstaking process of classical texts being dusted off, translated, and tentatively, hesitantly, absorbed back into the scholarly consciousness. The intellectual tide is turning, a new dawn promising illumination. But for all the brilliance re-emerging from ancient scrolls, one fundamental reality remains stubbornly unchanged. The eye is still the only lens. You still look up, just as Hipparchus did, just as the Babylonians did, with only your naked vision to bridge the infinite void between your earthly perch and the distant, twinkling cosmos. No matter how many old manuscripts you meticulously copy, no matter how many elegant theories you reconstruct, you still bump up against the unyielding physical limits of human sight. And let me tell you, trying to map the stars with that kind of limitation, while noble, is probably not something you'd survive, both physically. Think constant night work in freezing conditions and mentally. Think endless, mind-numbing repetition. But then, centuries after the shadowy figure of Hipparchus twirled on roads, a new titan of observation emerges, a man who would push the capabilities of the naked eye further than anyone before or since, a man whose sheer dedication to measurement would form the bedrock for the next great revolution in understanding the universe. His name, Tycho Brahe. Imagine him not in the dusty quiet of an ancient library, but on a windswept island, Ven, in the late 16th century. He's not just a scholar. He's an aristocrat with a penchant for spectacle, a man who, famously, lost part of his nose in a duel and wore a replacement of silver and gold. Now, that's dedication to one's aesthetic, wouldn't you say? Here on Ven, Tycho builds Uraniborg, a veritable palace of astronomical observation. It's not a humble workshop like Hipparchus might have had. It's a magnificent, self-sufficient scientific enterprise, complete with alchemical laboratories, a paper mill, and even a printing press. And at its heart, within the observatories of Uraniborg and its underground counterpart, Journeyborg, stand the instruments. These aren't handheld armillary spheres. Oh no. These are monumental, custom-built machines, gigantic quadrants, massive armillary spheres, and enormous mural quadrants, some fixed to walls, others rotating on intricate mechanisms. You feel the cold stone of the observatory as you step inside, the hush broken only by the soft click of gears or the rustle of a page. The air smells of ink and old parchment, overlaid with a faint, metallic tang from the instruments themselves. while the technologies separating Hipparchus and Tycho are vast, the former living in a world of papyrus and sand clocks, the latter at the cusp of the scientific revolution. Their fundamental methodological lineage is strikingly clear. Both understood that true knowledge lay in the meticulous, repeated measurement of the heavens. Hipparchus, remember, painstakingly charted the positions of stars to detect changes over time, revealing precession. Tycho, too, was obsessed with precision, but on a scale orders of magnitude greater. He wasn't just measuring, he was calibrating, correcting for atmospheric refraction, ensuring his instruments were perfectly aligned, and recording every single observation with an almost obsessive zeal. He took hundreds of thousands of readings, each one a tiny data point in a grand, cosmic tapestry. He even devised new methods for determining the exact time of observation, using highly accurate clocks, a significant upgrade from Hipparchus's reliance on water clocks and sundials, though the principle of precise timing remained essential for both. This relentless pursuit of accuracy is their shared pre-lens legacy. Both knew that without optical magnification, the only way to squeeze more information from the sky was through sheer, unadulterated rigor and the development of increasingly sophisticated non-telescopic instruments. Hipparchus revolutionized trigonometry to aid his calculations. Tycho refined instrumental design to minimize error, aiming for measurements accurate to within 1 arc minute, an astonishing feat for the naked eye. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the apparent size of a small coin seen from over 100 yards away. Try holding a coin up, then backing away until it's just a tiny speck. Now imagine doing that, but with stars, and needing absolute precision, night after night. It's a level of dedication that makes your average gym routine look like a leisurely stroll. Tycho's work wasn't merely a continuation. It was an amplification. His observations of the 1572 supernova in Cassiopeia proved that the heavens were not immutable, challenging the ancient Aristotelian doctrine of perfect, unchanging celestial spheres, a mainstream historical fact that completely upended traditional cosmology. He meticulously tracked comets, demonstrating they orbited beyond the moon, again disproving the notion of crystalline spheres. His comprehensive, unbroken series of planetary observations over decades provided the most accurate data set available at the time, far surpassing anything Hipparchus could have achieved with his more limited tools and scope. Historians still argue whether Tycho himself fully grasped the heliocentric implications hidden within his own extraordinary data, given his preference for a geo-heliocentric model where the planets orbited the sun. But the sun and moon orbited the Earth. Yet the sheer quality and volume of his observations became the indispensable raw material that Johannes Kepler would later use to derive his laws of planetary motion. Laws that finally, unequivocally, placed the sun at the center. In this sense, Tycho Brahe stands as the ultimate inheritor of Hipparchus's naked-eye legacy, perfecting the art of observation just as the curtain was about to rise on the age of the telescope. He was the last, great master of the pre-lens era, paving the way for a revolution he himself never fully participated in. A true bridge between the ancients and the radically new. You drift now through the quiet, star-dusted corridors of history, not chasing the bright, familiar constellations you learned in school, but seeking out the faint, persistent glow of a hidden star Hipparchus. He's the astronomical equivalent of that one song you hear everywhere, but can never quite name the artist. His melodies, his celestial rhythms, They underpin so much of what came later, yet his name often gets lost in the shuffle, a ghost in the machine of the heavens. It's a profound, almost cosmic irony, isn't it? That the man who meticulously mapped the skies, ensuring future generations could navigate by their light, would himself become something of a navigational challenge in the annals of fame. Imagine, if you will, the vast, echoing chambers of early modern astronomy. You walk through them, past the grand, ornate telescopes that would soon emerge past the whirring clocks and the meticulously etched armillary spheres. And everywhere you turn, there are fingerprints, faint smudges of genius. You pick up a diagram of planetary motion, and there, subtly encoded within the mathematics, is the ghost of Hipparchus's trigonometry. You look at a star chart, a seemingly modern creation, and you realize that the coordinates, the very system of locating a star's position, owes its existence to his relentless pursuit of precision. It's like finding a perfectly preserved Roman road beneath a bustling modern highway. You don't see it from above, but it's carrying all the weight, doing all the silent, foundational work. This is his profound, yet often unacknowledged, influence. It wasn't a flash, a sudden supernova of discovery that burst into public consciousness. Instead, it was more like the slow, inexorable pull of gravity itself, silently shaping the orbits of future thought. He built the very scaffolding upon which later giants, like Ptolemy, could erect their magnificent cosmic cathedrals. Remember how we talked about Ptolemy's Almagest, that encyclopedic tome that dominated astronomical thought for over 14 centuries? Well, it's not just influenced by Hipparchus, it's practically built on Hipparchus. Modern scholars, dissecting the Almagest with the forensic precision of a cosmic detective, have demonstrated that a significant portion of Ptolemy's star catalog, his lunar and solar models, and even his methods for calculating planetary positions, are direct inheritances or highly refined versions of Hipparchus's own work. It's one of the mainstream historical facts that, once you dig a little, reshapes your entire understanding of ancient astronomy. Ptolemy essentially took Hipparchus's rigorous data and mathematical innovations, packaged them, and presented them to the world, often without explicit attribution to the Rhodian master. It's a bit like someone finding your incredibly detailed, handwritten recipe for the perfect chocolate chip cookie, publishing it under their own name, and then winning all the baking competitions. You'd be thrilled for the cookies, but a little miffed about the credit, right? His discovery of precession, for instance, that slow, majestic wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the equinoxes over millennia, that was a truly mind-bending insight for its time. It required decades, if not centuries, of meticulous observation, comparing his own precise measurements with older records, painstakingly identifying the minute, almost imperceptible shift of the celestial sphere. To notice something so grand, so slow, without the aid of any mechanical amplification, is a testament to his sheer observational genius. You'd think such a foundational discovery would have his name emblazoned across every textbook, yet often it's presented as a general concept, divorced from its brilliant originator. It's a bit like discovering gravity, but then everyone just talks about apples falling, not the person who connected the dots. Then there's his mastery of trigonometry. Before Hipparchus, astronomy was largely descriptive. After Hipparchus, it became predictive, mathematical. He didn't just observe, he quantified. He developed methods to calculate distances and angles on the celestial sphere, laying the groundwork for spherical trigonometry. This wasn't just a clever mathematical trick. It was the key that unlocked the heavens, transforming astronomy from a mystical art into a rigorous science. Without his mathematical tools, the later models of the universe, whether geocentric or heliocentric, would have been mere philosophical musings, not testable, predictable systems. He essentially invented the ruler and protractor for the cosmos. Imagine trying to build a skyscraper with only intuition and a vague idea of up. You probably won't survive that construction project, let alone predict where the moon will be next Tuesday. Even the way we conceive of a star catalog, as a systematic listing of coordinates and magnitudes, is fundamentally Hipparchian. His lost catalog was a template, a paradigm-shifting achievement. It wasn't just a list. It was a map, a navigational aid for future generations, not just across the oceans, but across the vast ocean of time. The sheer audacity of mapping thousands of individual pinpricks of light in the night sky, categorizing them by brightness, and assigning them precise celestial addresses, with only your keen eyes and a few ingenious sighting instruments on roads. It's almost unfathomable from our modern perspective, spoiled as we are by digital telescopes and GPS. There's a quirky, almost tragic tidbit about his legacy. The very precision of his work sometimes contributed to its obscurity. His methods were so advanced for his time, so mathematically sophisticated, that later astronomers often found it easier to simply use his results rather than fully understand or replicate his complex calculations. It's like being given a super-advanced calculator by a genius, and you just punch in the numbers without understanding the algorithms running inside. You get the right answer, but the genius behind the machine remains a mystery. This meant his work was foundational, but often opaque, leading to a kind of black box phenomenon where his output was widely used. But the intellectual machinery that produced it was less often appreciated or even fully comprehended by those who came after. Historians still argue whether Ptolemy truly understood the full depth of Hipparchus's theoretical frameworks, or if he largely acted as a brilliant compiler and refiner of Hipparchus's empirical data and mathematical techniques. Some suggest Ptolemy's contributions were more in the systematic presentation and slight refinement, rather than completely independent derivations. This debate, the Ptolemy-Hipparchus problem, as it's sometimes called, underscores just how deeply intertwined their legacies are, and how much of Ptolemy's fame stands on the shoulders of the largely uncredited Rhodian. His influence didn't just fade into the sands of ancient Greece and Rome. Remember the Islamic Golden Age, how they painstakingly translated and preserved ancient texts. Hipparchus's spirit, if not always his name, traveled east. His methods, his star coordinates, his lunar theories, they were absorbed, critiqued, and built upon by astronomers in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba. Without the foundation he laid, the brilliant advances made by Islamic scholars in trigonometry, observational astronomy, and calendar reform would have been far more difficult, if not impossible. He was the silent bridge, connecting the insights of the classical world to the blossoming scientific endeavors of the medieval Islamic empires, setting the stage for Europe's eventual Renaissance reawakening. He's the original influencer who never got verified on celestial social media. So, as you nestle down, consider the silent, profound hum of Hipparchus's genius beneath the surface of everything you think you know about the stars. He isn't the flashy comet streaking across the night sky, grabbing all the attention. He's the dark matter of ancient astronomy, unseen, unacknowledged by many, yet providing the gravitational glue that holds the entire cosmic understanding together. His constellation of impact is not a visible pattern of stars, but the invisible network of connections, the foundational principles that quietly shaped the very way humanity looked up and understood its place in the grand, shimmering expanse above. And it's a legacy that, even after 2 millennia, continues to subtly guide our understanding of the universe, a testament to an unsung genius. You stand beneath the vast, inky canvas of night, not on some ancient Rhodian hillside with Hipparchus, but perhaps in your own backyard or gazing from a darkened window. You don't need a quadrant or an armillary sphere. You just need to look up. And there it is, that timeless, shimmering sprawl of stars, just as awe-inspiring as it was for the very first humans who tilted their heads back and wondered. You feel it, don't you? That primal urge to understand, to map, to place yourself within that glittering, endless tapestry. It's the same impulse that drove the Mesopotamians to etch their omens, the Egyptians to align their pyramids, the Greeks to model their perfect spheres, and Hipparchus to catalog those thousands of pinpricks of light with a precision that still baffles us. This inherent, unshakable curiosity, this eternal cosmic search, is humanity's oldest inheritance. We are, at our core, stargazers. From the campfires of prehistory to the humming supercomputers analyzing exoplanet data today, our gaze has been fixed upwards, seeking answers, seeking meaning. And let's be honest, standing out there, under all that infinite majesty, you probably won't survive this feeling of utter cosmic insignificance. But hey, it's a good kind of existential dread, right? The kind that makes you want to learn more, rather than just curl up into a ball. Think about it. For millennia, all we had were our eyes, our minds, and increasingly clever tools like Hipparchus's sight tubes and armillary spheres. He managed to catalog nearly 1,000 stars, determining their positions with an accuracy that would remain unsurpassed for well over 1,000 years, all before the invention of the telescope. It's like trying to build a skyscraper with a spork. Yet, he did it. This insatiable drive to quantify the immeasurable led us from simple constellation recognition to the intricate celestial mechanics we understand today. The fact that modern astronomy, with all its powerful instruments, confirms the astonishing scale of the universe, billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, with untold numbers of planets, only deepens the mystery and magnifies that initial spark of wonder. It's a mainstream historical fact that we've gone from believing our sun was the center of everything to realizing our entire galaxy is just one tiny island in a cosmic ocean. It's almost comical, isn't it? We look out into the vastness, searching for answers, and sometimes the universe just seems to wink back. Like that quirky tidbit about the WOW signal, a strong, narrowband radio signal detected by the Big Ear Radio Telescope in 1977, lasting 72 seconds and never detected again. Its exact origin remains a puzzle, sparking all sorts of imaginative theories, from distant alien broadcasts to, well, just a very enthusiastic cosmic hiccup. You can almost hear the universe saying, "Gotcha. Now guess again?" It just goes to show, even with all our incredible advances, the cosmos still holds plenty of secrets and plenty of opportunities to make us feel delightfully small. Historians still debate the full extent of Hipparchus's influence on later astronomers, particularly Ptolemy, whose Almagest served as the astronomical Bible for over 14 centuries. How much was original Ptolemaic work, and how much was a meticulously preserved, repackaged version of Hipparchus's lost star catalog and theories? This ongoing scholarly debate only highlights the shadow that Hipparchus cast. a shadow long and deep enough to influence generations, even when his direct writings were lost to time. It reminds us that knowledge is a river, constantly flowing, sometimes underground, only to resurface later, enriching the landscape. We've learned so much since Hipparchus first meticulously charted his stars, but the fundamental questions remain. Are we alone? What is the ultimate destiny of the universe? What is our true place in this cosmic ballet? The search continues, echoing across time, from ancient observatories to orbiting space telescopes, always driven by that same silent query. What else is out there? Now let the soft blanket of night settle around you. The universe, vast and magnificent, holds countless secrets, but for now its greatest mystery is the gentle pull of sleep. Imagine the stars, those distant suns, twinkling softly, not as cold, indifferent lights, but as tiny, reassuring beacons. They've watched over humanity for eons, witnessing every civilization rise and fall, every discovery, every quiet wonder. Your own breath is a part of this ancient rhythm, a gentle ebb and flow within the grand cosmic dance. The quiet hum of the night is a lullaby, composed by the universe itself, whispering tales of distant galaxies and the endless, peaceful expanse. Feel the gentle warmth of your bed, a safe harbor in this boundless sea of stars. Let your thoughts drift, like tiny boats on a calm lake, carrying away the worries of the day. The weight of the world, the vastness of the cosmos, all fade into a comforting haze. There's no need to grasp, no need to understand everything right now. Just be. The universe will still be there, waiting for your quiet wonder in the morning. For now, simply close your eyes and let the quiet embrace of slumber draw you deeper, softer into its peaceful depths. Sweet dreams.